Hello there, everyone. Welcome to Nightmare Narratives. I am your storyteller, and I'm here to guide you tonight. I know many of you use these videos to drift off to sleep, so before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. I'm always curious. Where are you watching from and what time is it in your part of the world? Now find your cozy spot and relax. My name is Michael Sullivan, and I should have listened to the old man's warnings. I was 34 when they sent me to Alaska in 1967. The Park Service needed someone to handle the paperwork for a big logging job in the Tongass National Forest. Clean cut, fresh permits, everything legal. At least that's what I thought. I remember stepping off that small plane and breathing in the cleanest air I'd ever tasted. The forest stretched out forever, huge cedar trees that looked like they'd been standing since the beginning of time. Some of those trees were so wide you'd need 10 people holding hands to wrap around them. The salmon were running that week, thousands of silver fish jumping upstream, their bodies flashing in the sunlight. It was like watching nature's own parade. I'd never seen anything like it back in Boston. That's when I first met Joseph Raven. He was an old native man, maybe 70, with deep lines on his face and eyes that seemed to see right through you. He stood by the river with a small group of people, all dressed in traditional clothes, singing something in their own language. "You the government man?" he asked when he saw me watching. "Park Ranger Sullivan," I said, showing him my badge. "I'm here about the logging permits." His face changed. The singing stopped, and everyone looked at me like I'd just said something terrible. "You can't cut these trees," Joseph said quietly. "This is sacred ground. Our ancestors sleep here." I pulled out my folder of official papers. "Sir, I understand your concerns, but we have all the proper permits. This is a sustainable harvest operation. We're only taking what the forest can spare." Joseph shook his head. "The trees don't belong to your government. They belong to the spirits of this place. You wake them up, they won't be happy." Honestly, I thought he was just being dramatic. I'd heard this kind of talk before, native people trying to stop progress with old stories. I had a job to do, and my mother needed money for her cancer treatments. This promotion could change everything. "For my family, I respect your beliefs," I told him. "But these permits are signed and approved. The logging starts tomorrow." The old man looked at me for a long moment. Then he said something that still gives me chills. "The Kushtaka will remember what you do here, and they'll make sure you remember too." I didn't know what Kushtaka meant, but I didn't like how he said it. That night, I stayed in a small cabin near the worksite. The consolidated timber trucks had already arrived. Huge machines that looked like metal monsters in the moonlight. Chainsaws, bulldozers, equipment to cut down centuries of growth in just a few hours. I tried to sleep, but something felt wrong. The forest was too quiet. Back home, you always heard city sounds, cars, sirens, people talking. But here, it was like the whole world was holding its breath. Around midnight, I heard singing again. The same voices from earlier, but coming from deeper in the forest. I looked out my window and saw lights moving between the trees, not flashlights, but something softer, like fireflies dancing. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. "Hello," I called. "Is someone out there?" The singing stopped instantly. The lights disappeared, but I could feel eyes watching me from the darkness. I went back inside and locked the door, feeling foolish. Just nerves, I told myself. New place, strange sounds. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow we'd start cutting, and all this mystery would disappear with the trees. But as I finally drifted off to sleep, I heard Joseph's words again. "The Kushtaka will remember." I had no idea what was about to remember me. The chainsaws started at dawn. I woke up to the sound of engines roaring to life. Through my cabin window, I watched the logging crew getting ready. Big men in hard hats and work boots, checking their equipment like soldiers preparing for battle. The foreman, a guy named Chuck, knocked on my door. "We're ready to start, Ranger. Just need your final okay. I signed the papers and handed them back. Stay within the marked areas, I told him. We don't want any problems. Chuck grinned. Don't worry. We'll have these trees down in no time. The first tree fell around 7 in the morning. It was one of the ancient cedars, probably 800 years old. When it crashed to the ground, the whole forest seemed to shake. Birds flew up from the other trees, crying out like they were in pain. That's when the headache started. At first, it was just a dull throb behind my eyes. I figured it was the noise from the saws, or maybe I hadn't slept well. But as the day went on and more trees fell, the pain got worse. By noon, I had to sit down. The world was spinning and I felt sick to my stomach. You okay, Ranger? One of the workers asked. Fine, I lied. Just need some air. I walked deeper into the forest, away from the cutting. The headache started to fade, but something else began happening. I started hearing things that weren't there, voices whispering in a language I didn't understand, footsteps following me through the trees. Sometimes I'd turn around, sure someone was behind me, but I'd find nothing but shadows. The strangest thing was my compass. I'd been using the same compass for 10 years. It never let me down. But now, every time I got near certain trees, the needle would start spinning wildly. It would point in impossible directions, sometimes straight down into the ground. Equipment problems? I jumped and spun around. Joseph Raven stood behind me, so quiet I hadn't heard him approach. My compass is acting up, I said, trying to sound normal. Must be magnetic interference or something. Joseph looked at the spinning needle. It's pointing to the old burial ground. What burial ground? Under the trees you're cutting. Our people have been buried there for hundreds of years. The compass knows. I felt a chill run down my spine. That's impossible. We did surveys. There's nothing marked on any of our maps. Your maps don't show everything, Joseph said quietly. Some things are older than maps. That afternoon things got worse. My survey equipment started going crazy. The GPS would show me standing in 3 different places at once. My radio crackled with voices speaking in what sounded like the same language I'd been hearing in my head. But the really scary part was my notebook. I always kept detailed notes, part of the job, measurements, tree counts, soil conditions, normal stuff. But when I opened my notebook that evening, half the pages were covered in symbols I'd never seen before. They looked like Native American writing, all curves and lines that seemed to move when I stared at them too long. And I had no memory of drawing them. I showed the pages to Chuck. Did anyone mess with my notebook? He looked at the symbols and frowned. Weird. Looks like Indian writing. Maybe one of the local kids is playing tricks on you. But I knew that wasn't it. The writing was in my own handwriting, my own pen. I just couldn't remember doing it. That night, I couldn't sleep at all. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw faces in the darkness. Old faces, sad faces, angry faces. And they were all looking at me like I'd done something terrible. Around 3 in the morning, I heard footsteps outside my cabin, slow, careful steps circling the building. I grabbed my flashlight and looked out the window. There was a man standing by the tree line. At first, I thought it was one of the logging crew. But as I looked closer, something made my blood freeze. The man had my face. He looked exactly like me, but older somehow. Sadder. He was wearing clothes I didn't recognize. Traditional native clothes like Joseph's people wore. And he was staring right at me through the window. I blinked and he was gone. I ran outside, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Hello? Who's there? Nothing. Just the wind in the trees and the distant sound of the river. But I found footprints in the soft ground. Footprints that matched my own boots exactly. I stood there in the cold Alaska night, shivering and trying to make sense of what I'd seen. The headaches, the voices, the symbols in my notebook, and now this. Joseph's words came back to me. The Kushtaka will remember what you do here. Whatever the Kushtaka was, I was starting to think it had already found me. The next morning, I couldn't remember my mother's face. I sat at the edge of my bed, trying to picture her. I knew she had cancer. I knew I needed money for her treatments. But when I tried to see her in my mind, there was just empty space where her face should be. It scared me more than anything else that had happened. I grabbed the photo from my wallet, the one I always carried of Mom and me at Christmas last year, but the woman in the picture looked like a stranger. I could see myself clearly, but her face was like looking at someone I'd never met. "This is impossible," I whispered to myself. I walked to the logging site, trying to shake off the feeling that something was very wrong with my head. The crew was already working. More trees falling, more noise, more dust in the air. But as I watched them cut, something strange happened. I started to feel angry, not at the noise or the mess, but at the cutting itself. Like each tree that fell was hurting me personally. "Stop," I heard myself say. Chuck looked up from his saw. "What's that, Ranger?" I blinked, surprised I'd spoken. "Nothing. Keep working." But the angry feeling got stronger. I found myself walking toward one of the biggest cedars, one they hadn't cut yet. When I put my hand on its bark, I felt something that made no sense. I felt the tree's memories. 800 years of rain and snow, centuries of salmon runs, generations of native children playing in its shade, ceremonies held beneath its branches, people buried near its roots. I jerked my hand away, breathing hard. Trees don't have memories. That's crazy thinking. But the knowledge stayed in my head. I knew things about this forest I'd never learned. I knew where the best fishing spots were, even though I'd never fished here. I knew which berries were safe to eat, which paths the deer used, where to find shelter in a storm. "You're starting to remember." I spun around. Joseph Raven stood behind me again, appearing like a ghost. "Remember what?" I asked. "What this place really is, what your people took away." "My people didn't take anything. I'm just here to do a job." Joseph's eyes were sad but kind. "Your great-grandfather helped move my people off their land back east. Did you know that?" I stared at him. I'd never told anyone about my family history. There was no way he could know about that. "How did you—" "The forest remembers everything," Joseph said. "And now it's sharing those memories with you." That afternoon, things got much worse. I was filling out paperwork when I noticed my handwriting had changed. Instead of my usual scribbled notes, I was writing detailed descriptions of traditional fishing methods in perfect English, but describing things I'd never seen. I wrote about building fish traps from cedar bark, about smoking salmon for winter storage, about ceremonies to thank the river spirits for their gifts. I had no idea where this knowledge was coming from. Later, when I tried to radio headquarters, I started speaking in a language I didn't know. The words just flowed out of me, smooth and natural, like I'd been speaking them my whole life. "Base camp, this is Sullivan," I said in English, then switched without thinking. "Akheni aya, dei kaudaka ax gaksu." I slammed down the radio, my hands shaking. What was happening to me? That evening, Chuck found me sitting by the river. "You feeling all right, Ranger? You've been acting pretty strange today." "I'm fine," I lied. "Well, we've got a problem. Some of the guys are saying they can't remember how to use their equipment. Jerry's been running a chainsaw for 20 years, but today he just stared at it like he'd never seen one before." I looked at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean they're forgetting how to do their jobs, but they keep talking about fish runs and berry seasons and other stuff that makes no sense. It's like someone's messing with their heads." My blood went cold. It wasn't just happening to me. "Maybe we should stop cutting for a few days," I suggested. Chuck shook his head. "Can't do that. The company's breathing down our necks. We're behind schedule as it is. That night I dreamed I was someone else. I was a young native man standing in this same forest, but it looked different, cleaner. No stumps, no tire tracks in the mud, No smell of gasoline and sawdust. Just ancient trees and clear streams and salmon so thick you could walk across the river on their backs. In the dream, I knew everyone's name. I knew the stories of every family, the history of every tree, the meaning of every ceremony. I knew how to live here without hurting anything. When I woke up, I was crying, but they weren't my tears. They belonged to the man in the dream, a man whose people had been forced to leave this place over 100 years ago. I walked outside to clear my head. The forest was different in the moonlight, quieter, more peaceful. I found myself walking along paths I couldn't see during the day, following routes that felt familiar, even though I'd never been here before. I ended up at a clearing I didn't remember finding before. In the center was a circle of stones, old and covered with moss. As I got closer, I realized what it was, a burial ground, right where we'd been cutting trees. I knelt down and touched one of the stones. Immediately, more memories flooded my mind. Not my memories, the memories of the people buried here. Their names, their stories, their children and grandchildren, all the families that had been forced to leave when the government decided this land was better used for logging and mining. Now you understand. I looked up. The man with my face stood at the edge of the clearing. But now I could see him clearly. He was me, but wearing traditional clothes. His hair was longer, his skin darker from sun and weather, and his eyes held a sadness so deep it made my chest hurt. "Who are you?" I whispered. "I'm what you could have been," he said in that other language, though somehow I understood every word. If your people had chosen to learn instead of take, if they had listened instead of conquered. I don't understand. You will, he said. The Kushtaka is giving you back what was stolen, not just from us, but from you too. He pointed to the burial ground. Your ancestor helped destroy this. Now you have the chance to protect it. But the permits, my job, my mother needs your mother. The other me smiled sadly. She died 3 months ago. The cancer took her while you were preparing for this assignment. The words hit me like a physical blow. No, that's not true. I just talked to her last week. Check your wallet. With trembling hands, I pulled out my wallet and looked for Mum's photo. The picture was there, but it was different now. It showed her in a hospital bed, thin and pale, with a date written on the back. 3 months ago. No, I whispered. I remember talking to her. I remember her asking about Alaska. The Kushtaka gave you that memory to help you understand, the other me said. Sometimes we need to lose what we think we know before we can find what we need to remember. I stared at the photo, my whole world crashing down around me. Everything I thought I was fighting for was already gone. What am I supposed to do now? I asked, but when I looked up, the other me had vanished. I was alone in the burial ground, surrounded by the spirits of the dead, finally understanding that I'd been helping to destroy the very thing I was supposed to protect. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't stop thinking about my mother, about the photo, about everything that had happened. When dawn came, I made a decision. I was going to stop the logging. I walked to the work site early, before the crew arrived. Chuck was there, getting equipment ready for another day of cutting. "Chuck, we need to stop," I said. He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Stop what?" "All of it. The cutting, the clearing, everything. This is a burial ground. We're destroying sacred sites." Chuck laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Come on, Ranger. You signed the permits yourself. We've got a job to do." "I'm pulling the permits," I said, trying to sound official. "This operation is shut down." "You can't do that." Chuck's face got red. "The company's got millions tied up in this project. You think they'll just walk away because you're having second thoughts?" That's when I noticed something strange about Chuck. His eyes looked empty, like he was seeing something far away. And When he talked, some of his words came out in that other language, the same one I'd been speaking. "Are you feeling all right?" I asked. "I'm fine," he snapped. But then he said something else. "Ha ani, mha tuanak." I understood it somehow. It meant our land, our spirits. Chuck blinked, looking confused. What did I just say? Before I could answer, the rest of the crew arrived. But they all looked wrong. They moved slowly, like they were walking through water. Their faces were blank, and they kept mumbling in that same language. "Jerry," I called to one of them. "You okay?" Jerry looked at me with empty eyes. "I can't remember how to start my saw," he said, "but I know exactly where the salmon will be running next month." That's when I understood. The Kushtaka wasn't just affecting me. It was taking away their ability to destroy the forest while giving them the knowledge to protect it. I heard footsteps behind me and turned to see Joseph Raven walking toward us. But he wasn't alone. There were at least 20 other native people with him, men, women, even some children. They moved in complete silence. "It's time to choose," Joseph said to me. "Choose what? Whether you'll keep helping them destroy our sacred places, or whether you'll remember who you really are." I looked around at the confused logging crew, at the burial ground we'd already disturbed, at all the cut trees lying on the ground like fallen soldiers. "I want to stop this," I said, "but I don't know how." Joseph nodded to the people with him. They began to sing, the same song I'd heard that first night. But now I understood the words. They were asking the ancestors for forgiveness. They were asking the forest spirits to be patient with people who didn't know any better. As they sang, something incredible happened. The logging crew began to remember, not their own memories, the memories of this place. They saw what the forest looked like before any white person had ever stepped foot here. They felt the pain of every tree that had been cut, every sacred site that had been destroyed. Chuck fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "What have we done?" he whispered. One by one, the workers began shutting down their equipment. They couldn't use the chainsaws anymore. Every time they tried to start them, their hands would shake, and they'd remember the trees as living beings, not just lumber. But then I heard new sounds: car engines, radio chatter, official voices. 3 black SUVs pulled up to the worksite. Men in expensive suits got out, along with some guys who looked like security. Behind them came a police car. "What's the meaning of this?" The lead suit pointed at the shutdown equipment. "Why isn't this crew working?" "Sir, there's been a problem," Chuck said, still crying. We can't cut any more trees." "What do you mean you can't cut trees? That's what we're paying you for." I stepped forward. "The permits are revoked. This is a protected burial site." The suit turned on me. "You're Sullivan? You're the one causing problems. Well, we've got new orders from Washington. You're being removed from this assignment." He handed me official papers. "You're being transferred immediately. Ranger Davis will take over the permits." I looked at the papers. They were signed by people way above my pay level. This company had serious connections. "And if these workers won't do their jobs," the suit continued, "we'll bring in new ones who will." That's when something strange happened. The man started forgetting things right in front of us. "We'll bring in new... He stopped, looking confused. What was I talking about? "The logging contract," his assistant said. "What logging contract?" I watched in amazement as the Kushtaka began working on them too. Within minutes, none of the company men could remember why they were here. They kept trying to look at their papers, but the words seemed to slide right out of their minds. Joseph walked up to the confused executives. "This land is protected now," he said simply. "You should leave." "Protected by who?" one of them asked, but he sounded lost. "By those who came before." Joseph said, "and by those who choose to remember." The company men got back in their cars, still looking confused. As they drove away, I could hear them on their radios, trying to explain their situation to headquarters. But every time they tried to talk about the logging project, they'd forget what they were saying. I turned to Joseph. "Is it over?" He looked at me with those deep, knowing eyes. "For now. But there will always be others who want to take what doesn't belong to them. The forest needs someone to watch over it." "Someone like who?" "Someone like you." I felt a strange peace settling over me. For the first time since I'd arrived in Alaska, the headaches were gone. The confusion was gone. I knew exactly where I belonged. "What happened to me, Joseph? What's really happening here?" Joseph was quiet for a long moment. "Do you remember falling?" "Falling?" 3 days ago, you were checking the trees marked for cutting. You climbed up to look at a big cedar to see if it was healthy enough to harvest. Suddenly, I could see it. I remembered climbing the tree, checking its condition. I remembered the branch breaking under my weight. I remembered falling 50 feet to the ground. I remembered the sound my neck made when I hit. "I died," I whispered. Joseph nodded. "The Kushtaka found you, gave you another chance, let you use your federal authority to protect what needed protecting." I looked down at my hands. They looked solid, real. "But I'm still here. Your body is buried beneath the cedar that killed you," Joseph said gently. "But your spirit chose to stay and guard this place." I felt tears running down my face, but they didn't feel sad. They felt like relief. "So what happens now?" Joseph smiled. "Now you become what you were always meant to be, a keeper of memories, a guardian of sacred places." I looked around at the forest. My forest now. The trees I would protect forever. The burial ground I would guard. The memories I would keep safe. For the first time since I'd arrived in Alaska, I felt like I was home. That was 50 years ago. I've been watching over this forest ever since. The logging company never came back. Every time someone tries to cut down the sacred trees, they forget why they came here. Their equipment breaks down. Their maps lead them in circles. The forest protects itself now. Sometimes other rangers come through, young people full of rules and permits, just like I used to be. I watch them from the shadows, waiting to see if they'll listen to the old stories or if they'll need to learn the hard way. Most of them listen. Word gets around in the Park Service about places that are difficult to manage. They mark this area as protected wilderness now. No logging, no development, no disturbing the peace. But today is different. Today, a young woman in a ranger uniform is walking through my forest. She has a folder of papers in her hand and a determined look on her face that reminds me of myself. I follow her quietly, the way Joseph used to follow me. She stops at the burial ground, the same place where I finally understood what I was really supposed to protect. "Hello," she calls out. "Is anyone there?" I step out from behind the cedar tree where I died. She doesn't run, which surprises me. She just looks at me with curious eyes. "You're not supposed to be here," she says. "This is protected land." "I know," I tell her. "I'm the one who protects it." She studies my face. "You're Michael Sullivan. There's a report about you in the files. You disappeared in 1967 during a logging operation." "I didn't disappear. I stayed." She opens her folder and shows me official papers, new permits, new plans. A mining company wants to dig for copper beneath the forest. "They sent me to do the environmental impact study," she says, "to see if the mining would hurt anything important." I feel that old anger rising up inside me. "And what do you think?" She looks around at the ancient trees, at the burial stones, at the clear stream running through the sacred ground. "I think some things are too important to dig up," she says, quietly. "Then why are you here?" because I needed to see for myself. I needed to understand what I was really being asked to do. I smile. She reminds me of myself, but smarter. She figured out the truth before it was too late. "What's your name?" I ask. "Maria Raven," she says. "Joseph Raven was my grandfather." Of course, I should have known. The cycle continues, just like Joseph said it would. "He told me stories about you," Maria continues, "about the ranger who chose to remember instead of forget, who chose to protect instead of destroy. Your grandfather was a wise man. He said you'd still be here, watching, waiting for the next person who needed to choose." I nod toward her papers. "So what will you choose?" Maria looks at the permits, then at the forest, then at me. Without a word, she walks to the stream and drops the papers into the flowing water. The current carries them away, dissolving them like they were never real. "Some choices are easy," she says. "I feel a warmth in my chest that I haven't felt in decades. The forest has a new guardian now, someone young, someone alive, someone who can do things I can't." "The mining company won't give up easily," I warn her. "Let them come," Maria says. "I know all the old stories now, and I know how to make people forget things they shouldn't remember." She walks away, back toward her truck, back toward her life as a living person with real authority. But before she disappears into the trees, she turns back to me. "Thank you," she calls out, "for keeping everything safe until I could get here." I watch her go, then settle back into my eternal watch. The forest is quiet again, peaceful again. Somewhere in the distance I can hear Joseph's laughter on the wind. The Kushtaka chose well all those years ago. They gave me a second chance to do the right thing. And now they've given the forest a living guardian who can protect it in ways I never could. I think about that young ranger from Boston who came here in 1967, so sure he knew what was right and wrong. He had to die to really understand what mattered. But maybe that's how it works sometimes. Maybe some lessons are so important that you have to lose everything else to learn them. The sun is setting behind the ancient cedars. Another day ends. Another night begins. The salmon are running again, just like they have for thousands of years. The burial ground rests in peace. And I keep watch, the way I always will. Because some promises last forever. Some memories never die. And some guardians never leave their post, even when they're already dead. My name is Thomas Whitman, or at least that's what I think I used to be called. I remember wearing a green uniform with a shiny badge on my chest. I remember walking these mountain trails every day, helping lost hikers find their way home. I remember loving these mountains more than anything else in the world. But that was before everything changed. Before I became something else. It started in 1978, right here in West Virginia. The mining companies came with their giant machines and explosives. They didn't just dig holes in the ground like the old days. No, they blew up entire mountaintops. Boom! And then another boom. Day after day, the sound echoed through the valleys like thunder that never stopped. I watched them destroy everything I loved. They cut down forests that had grown for hundreds of years. They poisoned streams where I used to drink clean, cold water. The fish died first, floating belly up in water that turned orange and yellow from all the chemicals. Then the birds stopped singing. Then people started getting sick. The mining bosses said it was safe. They said it would bring jobs to our poor communities. They gave money to politicians who smiled and signed papers that let them keep destroying our home. But I saw what was really happening. I saw children born with missing fingers. I saw old people coughing up blood. I saw mothers crying over babies who would never grow up. As a park ranger, I tried to stop them. I wrote reports. I called government offices. I begged anyone who would listen to help save our mountains. But nobody cared. The mining companies had too much money and too much power. Then one day I was checking on a stream near an old mining site. The water looked like liquid metal, all shiny and wrong. I bent down to take a sample, and that's when it happened. A pipe burst somewhere, upstream, and a wave of toxic chemicals came rushing down. The smell hit me first, like rotten eggs mixed with burning plastic. Then the liquid touched my skin. It burned, but not like normal fire. It burned deep inside me, changing something in my bones and blood. I stumbled home, feeling sick and dizzy. For days, I lay in bed with a fever that wouldn't break. My wife, Sarah, brought me soup and cold cloths, but nothing helped. I felt like I was dying and being reborn at the same time. During those fever dreams, I heard voices, not human voices, but the voices of the mountains themselves. They told me about the old days, when the air was clean and the water was pure. They told me about the Cherokee people who lived here before us, who understood how to take care of the land. They told me about all the animals and plants that were dying because of the poison. When I finally got out of bed, I wasn't the same person. My body felt different, stronger, but also strange. My eyes could see in the dark. I could smell things from miles away, and I could hear the pain of every living thing around me. The trees whispered their suffering. The streams cried out for help. Even the rocks seemed to moan under the weight of all that poison. But the worst part was the anger. It grew inside me like a fire that wouldn't die. Every time I saw a mining, a truck, every time I heard those explosions, every time I met a sick child, the anger got bigger and bigger. I tried to fight it, tried to stay human, but the chemicals in my blood had other plans. I started changing, not just inside, but outside. Too, my skin got tougher, my teeth got sharper. My hands grew longer and stronger. Sarah noticed first. She said I looked different, that my eyes had changed color. She was scared, but she still loved me. She still believed I was her Thomas. One night, I looked in the mirror and saw something that wasn't quite human anymore. But I also saw something else. A protector, a guardian, something that could fight back against the people who were killing our home. That's when I understood what I had become. The mountains had chosen me. The poison that was supposed to kill me had instead made me into something new, something that could save what was left of this beautiful, broken place. I was no longer just Thomas Whitman, the park ranger. I was something else now, something that could make the bad people pay for what they had done. The hunt was about to begin. The first man I killed was named Harold Brennan. He was the boss of Mountain Top Mining Company, and he lived in a big house far away from the poison he was spreading. I didn't plan it, not really. I was walking through the woods one night, trying to understand what I had become, when I smelled something wrong. Not the usual chemical smell. This was different. This was fear and guilt mixed together, coming from a car parked near the old logging road. I moved closer, staying in the shadows. My new body made no sound when I walked. It was like I had become part of the forest itself. Through the car window I could see Harold talking on his phone. His voice was loud and angry. "I don't care about the water tests," he was saying. "Pay off whoever you need to pay off. We're not stopping the operation now." He was talking about the mine that had poisoned me, the one that was still poisoning my neighbors. I listened as he made deal after deal, bribing officials to look the other way while children got sick. Something inside me snapped. Not my mind. That stayed calm and clear, but something deeper, something that connected me to every dying tree and poisoned stream in these mountains. I tapped on his car window. Harold looked up and saw my face in the dim light. He opened his mouth to scream, but no sound came out. Maybe it was the shock of seeing what I had become. Maybe it was something else. I pressed my hand against the glass, and tiny cracks spread across the window like spider webs. "You know who I am," I said quietly. My voice sounded different now, deeper, like rocks grinding together. "You know what you did to me? To all of us." Harold fumbled for his car keys, but his hands were shaking too much. I didn't rush. There was nowhere for him to go. These were my mountains now, and I knew every path, every cave, every hiding place. "Please," he whispered, "I can pay you. Whatever you want." "I want my mountains back," I told him. "I want clean water for the children. I want the birds to sing again." He couldn't give me those things. Money couldn't bring back what was already dead. When it was over, I felt something strange. Not guilt. That human feeling had burned away with the chemicals. Instead, I felt balance. Like I had set something right that had been wrong for too long. I dragged his body deep into the woods, to a place where the mining company had dumped their waste. The ground there was so poisoned that nothing would grow. But when I buried Harold in that dead soil, something amazing happened. Green shoots started pushing up through the dirt. Tiny flowers bloomed where his body lay. The poison that had made me also gave me the power to heal the land, but only through justice, only by stopping the people who were destroying it. I went home to Sarah that night. She was waiting in the kitchen, making tea like she always did when she couldn't sleep. "Where were you, Thomas?" she asked without turning around. "Walking," I said. It wasn't a lie. She looked at me then, and I saw her notice the dirt under my fingernails, the way my clothes smelled like the deep woods. But she didn't ask more questions. Maybe she didn't want to know the answers. Over the next few weeks, more mining bosses started disappearing. I didn't hunt them. They came to me. It was like the mountains themselves were calling them to account for their crimes. They would drive up into the hills alone, thinking they were meeting someone about a business deal. Instead, they found me. Each time, I tried to talk to them. First, I wanted them to understand what they had done, to feel sorry for the pain they had caused, but they never did. They only cared about money and power. So I gave them the same mercy they had shown the mountains, none at all. With each death, the land grew a little stronger. The orange water in the streams started running clearer. Dead trees began sprouting new leaves. It was slow, but it was working. The mining companies hired security guards to protect their bosses. They carried guns and walked in groups. But I had grown beyond human weapons. Bullets passed through me, like I was made of mist. Their flashlights couldn't find me in the darkness that had become my home. I learned to move like water, to strike like lightning. I became the storm that followed the mining trucks, the shadow that waited outside the company offices. The guilty ones knew I was coming for them. They felt it in their dreams, tasted it in their food. Some tried to leave town, but you can't outrun your crimes. The mountains remembered everything, and so did I. I followed them to their fancy houses in the city, to their vacation homes by the lake. There was nowhere they could hide from what they had done. By winter, the mining operations had slowed to almost nothing. The workers were scared to go into the mountains. The bosses were too afraid to give orders. Some packed up and left for other states, thinking distance would save them. They were wrong. I was no longer just Thomas Whitman, the park ranger who loved these hills. I'd become something bigger, something necessary. I was the price that had to be paid. I was the balance that had to be restored, and I was just getting started. The real test was coming. I could feel it in the changing wind, in the way the animals had started coming back to the healing streams. Someone was coming who would challenge everything I had become. Someone who might remind me what it felt like to be human. But until then, I had work to do. There were still men who needed to pay for their crimes, still land that needed to be healed. The hunt would continue. Her name was Rebecca Morrison, and she drove into town on a cold March morning in a beat-up Honda with New York license plates. I watched her from the ridge above the main road, feeling something I hadn't felt in months, curiosity about a living person. She wasn't like the others who came here, not a mining boss or a government man with a briefcase full of lies. She parked at May's Diner and got out slowly, looking around like she was seeing everything for the first time. Her camera hung around her neck, and she carried a notebook that was already thick with papers. I followed her as she walked through town, staying far enough back that she couldn't see me. She stopped at every house where someone had gotten sick. She knocked on doors and asked gentle questions. She wrote down names and dates. She took pictures of the orange water running from people's taps. Mrs. Henderson was the first to talk to her. Her grandson Billy had been born with only 3 fingers on his left hand, and the doctors said it was just bad luck. Rebecca sat on Mrs. Henderson's porch for 2 hours, listening to her story. She didn't interrupt or make promises she couldn't keep. She just listened. That's when I knew she was different. I watched her for 3 days before she noticed me. She was smart, I'll give her that. On her 4th morning in town, she sat on a rock by Miller's Creek and spoke to the empty woods. "I know someone's out there," she said calmly. "You've been following me since I got here. If you want to help these people, we should talk." I didn't answer right away. Part of me, the part that was still Thomas Whitman, wanted to step out and introduce myself. But the larger part, the part that had become something else, knew that would be dangerous for both of us. Instead, I left her something. That night, while she slept at the old motel, I broke into the mining company's office, 20 miles away. Their filing cabinets were full of papers they never wanted anyone to see. Test results showing poison in the water, letters from doctors about sick children, payments to officials who helped cover it all up. I left the whole stack on her car, a seat along with a single note: "The truth you're looking for." Rebecca found the papers the next morning. She sat in her car for an hour, reading page after page. I watched her face change as she understood how deep the lies went. She was angry, but it was a cold, focused anger. The kind that gets things done. She started making phone calls, lots of them. Lawyers, government officers, other reporters. Most hung up on her, but some listened. She was building something, a case, a story, a weapon made of words and evidence the mining company noticed. On her 6th day in town, 3 men in suits showed up at her motel room. I was there, hiding in the shadows behind the building. They didn't knock politely. "Miss Morrison," the biggest one said when she opened the door. "We hear you've been asking questions about our operation." "It's a free country," Rebecca said. She was scared, I could smell it, but she didn't back down. "Free for people who mind their own business," another man said. "Maybe it's time you went back to New York." They didn't threaten her directly. They didn't have to. The message was clear: leave or face the consequences. After they left, Rebecca sat on her bed and stared at the wall for a long time. I thought maybe she would pack up and go. Most people would have. But then she picked up her phone and made another call. "Mom," she said, "I need you to know I love you. I'm working on something important here, and if anything happens to me, there's a storage unit in Albany with all my research. The key is taped under my bathroom sink." That's when I decided to protect her. It started small. When she left her car overnight, I made sure the tires didn't get slashed. When she walked alone after dark, I followed at a distance. When the mining company's security guards tried to follow her, I made sure they got lost on mountain roads. They thought they knew. Rebecca was getting closer to the truth. She found more sick families, more covered-up deaths. She discovered that the government inspectors were taking bribes to ignore the poison. She even tracked down former mining workers who were willing to talk about what they'd seen. But the company wasn't going to let her finish her story. On a Thursday night, 2 weeks after she'd arrived, they made their move. I was watching from the tree line when a black truck pulled up behind the motel. 4 men got out, and they weren't there to talk. One had a baseball bat. Another carried a gas can. They were going to hurt her, maybe kill her, then burn down the motel and call it an accident. I couldn't let that happen. I moved faster than human eyes could follow. The first man never saw me coming. One moment he was walking toward Rebecca's room. The next he was flying backward into the truck's windshield. The glass exploded like ice on a frozen pond. The others shouted and reached for their guns, but I was already among them. The one with the baseball bat swung at my head. The bat snapped in half like a dry stick. I grabbed him by the throat and lifted him off the ground. "Leave," I said in that voice that sounded like grinding stones. "Leave this place and never come back." He nodded frantically and I let him go. He and the other survivor ran to their truck and drove away, tires screaming on the asphalt. They left their friend behind, the one who wouldn't be hurting anyone ever again. Rebecca's door opened slowly. She stood there in her pajamas, looking out at the scene. She saw the broken glass, the abandoned gas can, the man who wasn't moving anymore. Then she looked up and saw me standing in the shadows. Our eyes met for just a moment. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She just nodded slightly, like she was saying thank you. Then I melted back into the darkness, leaving her with questions I wasn't ready to answer. But something had changed between us. She knew I was there. She knew I was protecting her. And I knew that she might be the key to finishing what I had started. The mining company had made a mistake. They had tried to silence the one person who could tell the world what they had done. Now they would learn what happened to people who threatened. The things I protected. The real war was about to begin. Rebecca started leaving me notes. The first one was simple, tucked under a rock by Miller's Creek where she knew I would find it. "Thank you for saving me. I know you're watching. I want to help." I didn't answer. How could I? What would I say? "Hello? I used to be a park ranger, but now I'm a monster who kills people for poisoning the mountains." She wouldn't understand. Nobody could. But she kept trying. Every day she left another note. Sometimes it was just, "Good morning." Sometimes she wrote about her investigation, sharing what she'd learned. She told me about the families she'd met, the sick children, the covered-up deaths. She was putting together the whole ugly truth. One morning, her note was different. "I've been asking about the missing park ranger, Thomas Whitman. People say he disappeared around the same time the mining got worse. They say he loved these mountains more than anyone." My hands shook as I read those words. Thomas Whitman. That name felt like something from a dream, something that belonged to someone else. But hearing it, seeing it written in her careful handwriting, brought back memories I'd buried deep. I remembered Sarah making pancakes on Sunday mornings. I remembered helping lost hikers find their way home. I remembered the first time I saw an eagle soaring over Pine Ridge and how I'd stood there for an hour just watching it fly. I remembered being human. That night I did something I hadn't done in months. I went home. Sarah was in the kitchen, same as always, making tea she wouldn't drink. But she looked older now, thinner. Her hair had gone grey, and there were deep lines around her eyes. "Thomas?" she whispered when she saw me standing in the doorway. "Hello, Sarah." My voice was gentler than it had been in a long time. She came, to me slowly, like I was a wild animal that might run away. When she touched my face, her fingers were warm and soft. "I knew you were still out there," she said. "I could feel it. But you're different now. You're more. I'm not the man you married," I told her. "That man died when the poison got into his blood. I'm something else now. I know." She smiled through her tears. "But you're still mine. You're still the man who loves these mountains enough to die for them." We talked until sunrise. I told her about what I'd become, about the men I'd killed, about the land that was slowly healing. She listened without judging, without trying to talk me out of it. "The reporter," she said finally. "Rebecca. She's been asking about you." "I know. She's good people, Thomas. She wants to help. Maybe it's time you let her." The next morning, I left Rebecca a different kind of note. "Meet me at the old fire tower on Copper Mountain. Come alone. Bring your camera." I got there first and waited. The fire tower had been abandoned for years, but it was still strong. I climbed to the top and looked out over the land I'd been protecting. In the distance, I could see the mining sites, some still active, others slowly turning green again. Rebecca arrived just as the sun was setting. She climbed the tower steps slowly, her camera bag heavy on her shoulder. When she reached the top, she wasn't out of breath like a normal person would be. She was tough. "Thomas Whitman," she said, when she saw me waiting. It wasn't a question. "What's left of him?" I replied. We stood there in the fading light, looking at each other. She was smaller than I'd expected, but there was something strong in her eyes, something that reminded me of the mountains themselves, patient, enduring, unbreakable. "I know what you've been doing," she said. "I know about the missing executives, the way the land is healing where they died. I know you're not entirely human anymore. Are you afraid of me?" She thought about it for a moment. "I should be, but I'm not. Because I've seen what those men did to this place. I've seen the children with birth defects, the families drinking poisoned water. If you're the only thing standing between them and more destruction, then maybe the world needs more monsters like you." I felt something crack inside my chest. Something that had been frozen for months started to thaw. "I remember being a park ranger," I said. "I remember loving these mountains, wanting to protect them. But I also remember feeling helpless, watching everything die while rich men got richer." "You're not helpless now." "No, but I'm not sure I'm still human either." Rebecca pulled out her camera and took a picture of me. The flash lit up the growing darkness for just a moment. "Maybe human isn't what matters," she said, looking at the photo on her camera's small screen. "Maybe what matters is that you're still fighting for what's right." She showed me the picture. In it, I looked like something from a nightmare, tall, pale, with eyes that reflected light like an animal's. But there was something else there, too, something that looked like the Thomas Whitman who used to wear a ranger's badge. "I need your help," she said. "I have enough evidence to expose what the mining companies have done, but I need more. I need the files they've hidden, the records they've destroyed. I need things only you can get." "And then what?" "You write your story, and they find a way to cover it up like they always do?" "Not this time. I have contacts at major newspapers, TV stations. This story is going to be too big to hide, but I need proof, real proof." I thought about it. For months I'd been focused on revenge, on making the guilty pay one by one. But Rebecca was offering something different, a chance to expose the truth to everyone, a chance to make sure this never happened again. "There's a vault under the main mining office," I said finally. "Files going back 20 years. Test results, payoff records, everything, but it's heavily guarded. Can you get to it?" I smiled, and for the first time in months, it felt real. "I'm not just Thomas Whitman anymore, Rebecca. I'm something the mountains made to protect themselves. Those guards won't be a problem." She nodded and put away her camera. "Then let's finish this. Let's make sure everyone knows what happened here." As we climbed down from the tower together, I felt something I hadn't felt since my transformation began. Hope, not just for revenge, but for real justice. For healing that went deeper than just the land. Rebecca had reminded me that being human wasn't about what you looked like or how you sounded. It was about caring enough to fight for what was right, even when it cost you everything. The mining companies had taken Thomas Whitman and turned him into something else. But maybe, with Rebecca's help, that something else could save more than just these mountains. Maybe it could save the world. The vault was 3 stories underground, behind steel doors and armed guards. But steel and guns meant nothing to what I had become. I went in at midnight, when the building was almost empty. The security cameras couldn't see me. I moved like shadow, like mist. The guards heard nothing until it was too late. I didn't kill them. They were just doing their jobs, trying to feed their families. I just made them sleep for a while. The vault door was thick as a bank's, but my hands had grown strong enough to bend metal. I peeled it back like the lid of a can and stepped inside. 20 years of secrets filled that room, boxes and boxes of files, all organized by date. I started with 1978, the year everything changed, the year they started the big mining operation that poisoned me and so many others. What I found made me angrier than I'd ever been. They knew, from the very beginning, they knew the chemicals would poison the water. They knew children would be born sick. They knew people would die. But they did it anyway because it was cheaper than doing it right. There were memos about paying off doctors to lie about cancer rates, letters to politicians asking them to ignore environmental reports, even recordings of phone calls where company bosses laughed about the stupid hillbillies who didn't know they were being poisoned. I took everything, every file, every photo, every piece of evidence. My arms could carry more than any humans, and I made trip after trip until Rebecca's motel room looked like a library. She worked for 3 days straight, reading through it. She hardly slept, hardly ate. Her eyes got red from staring at papers, but she didn't stop. She was building something bigger than just a news story. She was building a case that would destroy the mining company forever. "This is incredible," she said on the third night, holding up a folder thick with documents. "They've been bribing the water inspector for 15 years. He knew the wells were poisoned, but he kept signing papers saying they were safe. Can you prove it with this evidence?" "Absolutely. But Thomas," she looked at me with worried eyes, "once this story comes out, they're going to know it was you who got these files. They're going to come after you with everything they have. Let them come." But they didn't wait for the story to be published. Somehow, they found out what we were doing. Maybe they noticed the missing security guards, or maybe they had cameras I hadn't seen. Either way, they knew. The attack came at dawn. Not just a few men in suits this time, a whole army of them, company security, hired mercenaries, even some corrupt local police. They surrounded the motel like it was a military operation. I was in the woods behind the building when they arrived. I saw them setting up, getting ready to storm Rebecca's room. There were at least 30 of them, all armed with the kind of weapons soldiers carry. For the first time since my transformation, I felt fear, not for myself. Bullets couldn't really hurt me anymore, but for Rebecca. She was just a human being with a camera and a notebook. She couldn't fight off an army. I had to make a choice. I could run, disappear back into the mountains and stay hidden forever. Or I could fight, knowing that once I did, there would be no going back. Everyone would know what I was, what I had become. I thought about Thomas Whitman, the park ranger who had loved these mountains. I thought about all the children who had been born sick because of the poison. I thought about the streams that used to run clear and cold. Then I stepped out of the woods and walked toward the motel. The first man to see me stopped and stared. Then he shouted to the others, pointing at me with a shaking hand. 30 guns turned in my direction. "You don't want to do this," I called out in my stone-grinding voice. "Walk away now, and you can go home to your families." Their leader, a big man with scars on his face, laughed. "You're outnumbered 30 to 1, freak. Surrender now, and maybe we'll make it quick." I smiled, and I knew it wasn't a human smile anymore. "I'm not outnumbered. You are." The mountains were with me. I could feel them, lending me their strength. The earth under my feet, the trees around the motel, even the rocks in the parking lot. They all remembered what these men represented. They all wanted justice. The shooting started, but I was already moving. Bullets passed through me like I was made of fog. I reached the first group of men before they could reload. It was over quickly. Some ran, some begged, a few kept fighting, until the very end. But in 10 minutes, the only ones left standing were me and Rebecca, who had watched the whole thing from her window. She came outside slowly, stepping over the broken weapons and empty uniforms scattered across the parking lot. She looked at me with something like awe. You didn't kill them, she said. No, they were just following orders. The real criminals are still out there in their boardrooms and fancy offices. What happens now? I looked toward the horizon, where the sun was rising over mountains that were slowly turning green again. Now you publish your story. You show the world what they did, and I make sure they can never do it again. Rebecca's story came out 2 weeks later, spread across the front pages of newspapers from New York to Los Angeles. The evidence was overwhelming. The mining company's stock price collapsed overnight. Government investigators swarmed the offices. Criminal charges were filed against dozens of executives. But the real change happened here, in the mountains. Families who had been told their sick children were just unlucky finally learned the truth. Communities that had been divided by company propaganda came together to demand justice. Clean water started flowing again. As new regulations shut down the worst mining operations, I stayed in the shadows, watching it all unfold. Sometimes reporters came looking for the mysterious figure who had helped Rebecca get her evidence. But I was good at not being found when I didn't want to be. Sarah visited me in the woods one evening, bringing news from town. "They're building a memorial," she said, "for all the people who died from the poison. They want to put Thomas Whitman's name on it, the park ranger who tried to warn everyone. Thomas Whitman is dead," I told her. "He died the day he fell into that poisoned stream." Maybe, but something good came from his death, something that saved a lot of people. She was right. The mining companies were broken now, their crimes exposed for everyone to see. New laws protected the environment. Children were being born healthy again. The mountains were healing. But I was still what I had become, still more monster than man, still carrying the anger and the chemicals that had changed me forever. Rebecca found me one last time before she left town. She came to the old fire tower where we had first really talked. "I'm going back to New York," she said, "but I wanted to thank you for everything. You're the one who deserves thanks. You told the truth when no one else would. We both did what we had to do." She handed me a copy of her newspaper with the story that had changed everything. "Keep this, so you remember that being a monster isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes monsters are exactly what the world needs." After she left, I climbed to the top of the fire tower and looked out over my mountains. They were still scarred from years of abuse, but life was returning. Green things grew where poison had once pooled. Clear water ran in streams that had been orange with chemicals. I would stay here, watching over this place. The mining companies were gone, but there would always be others who wanted to destroy the land for profit. When they came, they would find me waiting. My name used to be Thomas Whitman. I used to be a park ranger who loved the mountains but couldn't protect them. Now I was something else. Something the mountains had made from poison and anger and love. I was their guardian, their protector, their monster, and I would never let them be hurt again. My name is Elena Kowalski, and I work as a park ranger in the Boundary Waters of Minnesota. I'm 29 years old, and I thought I knew what cold was until the winter of 1973. The smokestacks from the paper mill cut through the frozen sky like giant black fingers. Every morning I watch them pump out thick grey smoke that hangs over the lake like a dirty blanket. The smell gets into everything. My clothes, my hair, even my food tastes like chemicals now. Down at the docks, the Duluth Steel Company has been dumping their waste into Lake Superior for years. They say it's safe, but I've seen what happens under the ice. Dead fish float in pockets of water that never freeze, their bellies white and bloated. The water there looks like oil, thick and wrong. The worst part is how quiet everything has become. No birds sing anymore. The fish that used to jump and splash are gone. Even the wind sounds different, like it's carrying sadness. People are hurting bad this winter. The iron mines closed down because steel from other countries costs less. 40 out of every 100 men in town have no work. Families have to choose between keeping warm or buying food. Some people are burning their furniture just to stay alive. I drive past houses every day where smoke should be coming from chimneys, but there's nothing. Just dark windows and snow piling up against doors that nobody opens. Kids walk to school in the same clothes they wore yesterday and the day before. Their parents can't afford to wash them because heating water costs too much. The company bosses don't care. Last week, I saw them through the windows of the fancy restaurant downtown. They were laughing and eating steak while outside, people had dug through trash looking for food. The bosses made more money this year than ever before, but somehow that means everyone else has to suffer. My job is supposed to protect the wilderness, but I feel like I'm just watching it die. The government tells me to make sure people follow the hunting rules, but nobody talks about the real criminals. The companies that pour poison into our water get to do whatever they want. Robert Kingbird is an elder from the Ojibwe tribe. He's been trying to teach people about the old ways, how his people lived here for thousands of years without destroying everything. But now the wild rice beds where his family used to gather food are dead. The water is too dirty for anything to grow. Robert talks about something called the Wendigo. He says it's a spirit that comes when people forget how to share, when they take more than they need. He's been doing ceremonies to protect us from it, burning sage and singing old songs. Some people think he's crazy, but I've started to wonder if he knows something we don't. My grandmother used to tell me stories about the old country, about Poland during the war. She said people got so hungry they ate bark from trees and made soup from grass. She said hunger could change people, make them do things they never thought they could do. I always thought those were just stories, but lately I've been having the strangest dreams. I dream about being so hungry that my stomach feels like it's eating itself. I wake up with my mouth watering, but not for normal food. I want something I can't name, something that makes my regular meals taste like cardboard. Yesterday, I caught myself staring at the raw hamburger meat in my freezer. For a moment, I wanted to eat it right there, frozen and bloody. The feeling scared me so much. I slammed the freezer door shut and didn't eat anything for the rest of the day. The hunger is getting worse. Not just for me, I can see it in other people too. There's a look in their eyes, like they're starving for something that doesn't exist. The men who used to work at the steel plant walk around downtown like ghosts, their faces hollow and desperate. Even the people who still have jobs seem empty inside. They buy things they don't need, eat until they're sick, but nothing fills the hole inside them. It's like we're all dying of thirst while standing next to a poisoned well. Something is waking up in this place. I can feel it in the wind that blows across the frozen lake. I can taste it in the snow that falls grey instead of white. The old people like Robert know what it is, but the rest of us are too busy destroying everything to listen. The Wendigo is coming. I don't know what that means yet, but I can feel it in my bones. The hunger is spreading, and I'm afraid of what we might do when it gets too strong to ignore. I drove to Robert's house the next evening. Snow was falling again, and my truck's headlights made everything look ghostly. His place is small, just a cabin really. But smoke was coming from the chimney, and yellow light glowed in the windows. At least someone still had heat. Robert opened the door before I even knocked. He's a tall man with grey hair in braids, and his eyes are the kind that seem to see more than they should. "Elena," he said quietly, "I was wondering when you'd come." His living room was warm and smelled like burning wood and something else. Sage, maybe. There were old pictures on the walls showing people in traditional clothes, and a drum sat in the corner like it was waiting. "I've been having strange dreams," I told him, "and I'm hungry all the time, but food doesn't help." Robert nodded like he expected this. He made us tea and sat across from me in an old chair. "Tell me about your family," he said. I wasn't sure why that mattered, but something about his voice made me want to talk. "My grandparents came from Poland," I said. "They lived through the war. Grandma told me stories about being so hungry they ate anything they could find. She said people changed when they got that hungry. What kind of changes? Robert asked. I thought about Grandma's stories. She always got quiet when she told them, like the words hurt to say. She said some people forgot how to be human. They took food from children. They stole from neighbors. Some people... I stopped talking. Some people ate things they shouldn't eat, Robert finished for me. I felt cold even though the room was warm. How did you know? Because the same thing happened to my people, he said. Long before your grandparents' time, when the government took our children and killed our buffalo, when they poisoned our water and destroyed our rice beds. Hunger does things to people. Robert got up and looked out the window at the falling snow. The Wendigo isn't just a story, Elena. It's what happens when people lose their way, when they take and take but never give back. I don't understand, I said, but part of me did. Part of me was scared because I was starting to understand too much. Your body knows something your mind doesn't want to accept, Robert said. The hunger you feel isn't for food, it's for balance, for justice. That night, I dreamed about my grandmother again. But this time, I wasn't just hearing her stories. I was living them. I was in a cold place where the trees were bare and the ground was frozen. People around me were thin and desperate, fighting over scraps of bread. But the worst part was the feeling inside me, a gnawing, twisting hunger that made me look at other people and think terrible things. In the dream, I understood why some people had done things they never thought they could do. I woke up at 3 a.m. with my heart pounding. My mouth tasted like metal and my hands were shaking. When I looked in the bathroom mirror, my eyes looked different, hungrier. The next few days were strange. I kept doing my job, checking on campsites and making sure people followed the rules, but everything felt different. Colors seemed brighter, smells were stronger. I could hear things I'd never noticed before. At the grocery store, I watched people buying food they didn't need while others counted coins to buy bread. I saw the store owner throw away meat that was still good, rather than give it to people who couldn't pay. The waste made me angry in a way I'd never felt before. Walking past the paper mill, I smelled something new in the smoke. Not just chemicals, but something rotten, something dead. When I got home, I couldn't eat the fish I'd planned for dinner. It tasted wrong, like it was already spoiled. But the raw hamburger in my freezer smelled amazing. I tried to ignore these feelings, but they kept getting stronger. At work, when I saw the reports about companies dumping waste in the lake, I felt rage building inside me like a fire. These people were poisoning everything, and nobody was stopping them. One morning, I woke up and couldn't remember going to bed. My boots were muddy and there were pine needles in my hair. When I looked outside, I saw footprints in the snow leading from my door into the woods. My footprints. I followed them. They led deep into the forest, farther than I'd ever walked in winter. At the end of the trail, I found something that made my blood freeze. There was a deer carcass, but it had been torn apart by something with hands, not claws. The bones were cracked open, and the marrow was gone. Around the body, the snow was stained red in a perfect circle. I knew I had done this. I could taste the memory of it, even though I couldn't remember it happening. When I got back to my truck, my radio was crackling with an emergency call. A group of executives from Duluth Steel were having a meeting at the fancy lodge by the lake. They wanted extra security because of environmental terrorists. I almost laughed. The real terrorists were the ones in suits, poisoning our water and stealing our future. But as I drove toward the lodge, I felt something shifting inside me. The hunger was changing, becoming more focused. I was starting to understand what Robert meant about balance and justice. Some people took everything and gave nothing back. They fed on others like parasites. Maybe it was time for something to feed on them. The lodge sat by the frozen lake like a fat spider in its web. Expensive cars were parked outside, their engines still warm from the heated garages where rich men kept their toys. I could smell the money. From here, leather seats, fancy cologne, and something else. something rotten underneath. I walked up to the security guard at the door. He knew me from my ranger work, so he just nodded and let me in. These corporate types loved having government officials around. It made them feel safe. Inside, the lodge was all wood and stone, with a fire crackling in a fireplace big enough to roast a whole deer. The executives sat around a long table, drinking whiskey and laughing while they looked at maps of the lake. I stood in the back and listened. They were planning something big. "The mercury levels are higher than we reported," one man said. He was fat and wore a suit that probably cost more than most people made in a year. "But the EPA won't check for another 6 months." "Perfect," said another. "We can dump the rest of the waste by then. By the time they test again, it'll be too late to prove anything." They laughed like this was the funniest joke in the world, like poisoning the lake was just good business. "What about the fish?" asked a younger man. "People are starting to notice they're dying." "So what?" The fat man shrugged. "We'll blame it on the weather, cold winter, natural die-off. People believe what they want to believe." I felt something hot and angry rising in my chest. These men were killing everything, and they didn't care. They were eating the future, swallowing it whole, while children went hungry. "The Indian reservation is getting suspicious," someone else said. "That old man, Kingbird, has been talking to reporters." "Indians don't matter," the fat man said. "Nobody listens to them anyway. We own the politicians, we own the newspapers, we own this whole lake." That's when I understood what Robert had been trying to tell me. These men weren't just greedy, they were cannibals. They ate people's lives, their children's futures, their hope. They consumed everything and gave nothing back. The Wendigo wasn't coming. It was already here, sitting at this table in expensive suits, but something else was here too. Something that was getting very, very hungry. I walked closer to the table. The men looked up at me with smiles that didn't reach their eyes. "Officer," the fat man said, "good to see you here. We were just discussing some environmental improvements." "I heard," I said. My voice sounded strange, deeper than usual. "Very interesting improvements. We're always looking for ways to help the community," another man said. "Jobs, economic growth, progress." "Progress," I repeated. The word tasted like poison in my mouth. "Is that what you call it when children can't drink the water?" The men looked at each other. The fat man's smile got tighter. "Now, officer, I think you might be confused about some things. We follow all the regulations. We're good corporate citizens." I could smell the lies on them like cheap perfume. But underneath that, I smelled something else. Fear. They were afraid. Of me, and they didn't even know why. "I've been watching you," I said, "all of you. I know what you put in the water. I know what you do in the dark." "I think you should leave," the fat man said. His voice was trying to sound tough, but it shook a little. "We're having a private meeting." "So am I," I said. That's when I felt it happen. The change I'd been fighting for weeks. My grandmother's hunger, Robert's stories, the dead fish and poisoned water. It all came together inside me like a storm. I wasn't Elena, the park ranger, anymore. I was something older, something that had been sleeping for too long. I was the balance that came when things got too far out of balance. The fat man started to stand up, but I was faster, much faster. I pushed him back into his chair, and my hand on his shoulder felt like iron. He made a small sound, like a mouse. "You want to know about hunger?" I whispered. "Let me show you." The other men were backing away from the table now, but the room suddenly felt much smaller. The windows were dark, and the fire in the fireplace had died down to glowing coals. We were alone with the shadows. I looked at each of them, and I could see what they really were. Not men, parasites. Things that fed on others and gave nothing. Big Cakes did. They had been eating the world piece by piece, and now they were fat and happy and full, but I was still hungry, so very, very hungry. "Please," the fat man whispered, "we can make a deal. We can pay you." "With what?" I asked. "The money you stole from the workers? The lake you poisoned? The future you ate?" I leaned closer to him, and I could smell his fear now. It was sharp and sour, like spoiled milk. "You've been feeding for so long," I said. "Now it's someone else's turn." The lights went out all at once. In the darkness, I heard the fat man scream, but it was cut short. The other men were running, but they couldn't see where they were going. I could see perfectly. I could smell them, hear their hearts beating like drums. They had nowhere to go. When the lights came back on, the room was very quiet. The fat man was still sitting in his chair, but his eyes were empty. He looked like he'd been drained of something important. The other men were gone, just gone. But I wasn't hungry anymore. For the first time in weeks, I felt full. I walked outside into the cold night air. The lake stretched out in front of me, dark and still under the stars. But something was different. The water looked cleaner somehow, like it was starting to heal. Behind me, the lodge was quiet. Tomorrow, people would find the fat man and wonder what happened to the others. But I didn't think anyone would miss them very much. I got in my truck and drove home. In the mirror, my eyes looked normal again, but I knew that Elena the park ranger was gone forever. Something else was driving this truck, something that would be watching and waiting, because there were more fat men in expensive suits, more people who ate the world and left nothing but poison behind. 3 days passed before anyone found what was left at the lodge. The fat man was still sitting in his chair, but he looked like a balloon that had lost all its air. The police said it was a heart attack. They couldn't find the other executives anywhere. I went back to work like nothing had happened. But everything was different now. The lake looked cleaner, even though that should have been impossible. Fish were swimming near the surface again, and the water didn't smell like chemicals anymore. Other people noticed too. Old Pete, who ran the bait shop, said the ice fishing was the best it had been in years. The Ojibwe families started coming, back to check their traditional fishing spots. Even the birds seemed to be returning, but I was changing in ways that scared me. My reflection in the mirror looked wrong sometimes, like something else was looking back. My teeth felt sharper. My hands were stronger than they should be. The hunger came and went now. When I saw people being cruel or wasteful, it would wake up inside me like a sleeping animal. When I drove past the paper mill, I could smell the greed of the men inside, and my mouth would water. Robert came to see me at my cabin one evening. He didn't knock, just walked in like he owned the place. His eyes were sad and knowing. "It's done then," he said, sitting down at my kitchen table. "What's done?" I asked, but we both knew what he meant. "The change. You've become what we needed you to become." He looked out the window at the lake. "My grandmother told me this might happen someday. When the balance got too broken, something would have to fix it." I poured us both coffee with hands that shook, just a little. "Am I still human?" "That's the wrong question," Robert said. "The question is, are you still you?" I thought about it. I still loved the smell of coffee in the morning. I still worried about my job and paid my bills. I still missed my grandmother and wished I could call her on the phone. But I also dreamed about hunting men in expensive suits. I could taste their fear and feel their greed like poison in the air. And when I thought about what they had done, to the lake, to the people, I felt a hunger that went deeper than my bones. "I don't know," I said finally. "The Wendigo isn't evil," Robert said. "People think it is because they don't understand. It's like winter, cold and hard, but necessary. Without winter, nothing would rest. Nothing would be reborn." He reached across the table and touched my hand. His skin was warm and rough from years of work. "You're winter now, Elena. You're the rest that comes after too much taking." That night, I walked down to the lake. The ice was thick enough to hold me, and my footsteps sounded loud in the quiet air. Above me, the stars were brighter than I remembered. I thought about my grandmother's stories, about people who got so hungry, They forgot how to be human. But maybe they hadn't forgotten. Maybe they had just remembered something older. Before farms and factories, before money and borders, people knew that everything was connected. Take too much, and something would take from you. Hurt the land, and the land would hurt you back. The executives at the lodge had taken and taken, until they forgot they were part of the same world they were destroying. They had eaten the future and called it progress. But the Wendigo was older than progress. It remembered when the world was in balance. I knelt down on the ice and put my hand against the frozen surface. Below me, fish were moving in the dark water. They were alive because some very bad men were not. "I understand now," I whispered to the lake. The next morning, my phone rang. It was Sheriff Martinez from town. "Elena, we got a situation," he said. "3 more executives from the steel company are missing. Last anyone saw them, they were heading to some kind of meeting yesterday." I felt that familiar stirring in my chest. Not hunger exactly, but something like satisfaction. "Any idea what happened to them?" I asked. "Strangest thing," the sheriff said. "We found their car by the lake, but no sign of them anywhere. Just their clothes on the shore, folded up neat and tidy. And Elna, the clothes were clean, like perfectly clean, no dirt, no stains, nothing." I knew what that meant. I had been very thorough. "I'll keep an eye out," I told him. After I hung up, I made myself breakfast, eggs and bacon, normal food that tasted normal. But while I ate, I planned. There were more meetings to attend, more executives to visit. The paper mill had a board of directors. The mining companies had shareholders, so many people who ate the world and gave nothing back. I was becoming something that could eat them instead. The funny thing was, I didn't feel guilty about it. I felt like I was finally doing the job I was meant to do, not protecting trees and lakes from ordinary people who just wanted to fish and camp, protecting everything from the real monsters. The ones who wore suits and smiled while they poisoned children. That evening I drove past the paper mill. The smokestacks were still pumping out their grey poison, but not as much as before. Some of the machines had broken down and the company couldn't afford to fix them. Not without their best executives, to make the deals. I parked and walked around to the back of the building. Through a window, I could see the night shift workers. They looked tired and worried. These weren't the enemy. These were just people trying to feed their families. But upstairs, in the fancy offices, lights were still burning. Men in clean shirts were working late, figuring out new ways to make money from other people's suffering. My reflection in the window showed teeth that were definitely sharper than they used to be. My eyes looked hungry again. It was time for another meeting. The hunger was calling, and this time I wasn't going to fight it. I was going to feed it exactly what it wanted. I waited until midnight to enter the paper mill. The security guard was asleep in his booth, and my ranger badge got me past the locked doors anyway. Companies always wanted to look like they cooperated with government officials. The executive offices were on the 3rd floor. I could smell them before I saw them. Coffee, expensive aftershave, and that sour smell of men who spent their days making money from other people's pain. 4 of them were still there, working late. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I watched them point at charts and graphs. They were planning something big. I walked in without knocking. They looked up, surprised, but not worried. "Not yet. Gentlemen," I said, closing the door behind me. "I'm Elena Kowalski, park ranger. I need to talk to you about the lake." The oldest one, a man with gray hair and a face like a hawk, smiled at me. "Of course, officer. We're always happy to help with environmental concerns." "Good," I said, sitting down at their table. "Because I have a lot of environmental concerns." I spread out the files I'd brought. Pictures of dead fish, water samples, reports that had been buried and ignored, all the evidence of what they'd been doing to Lake Superior. "This is all very interesting," the hawk-faced man said, "but I'm not sure what you expect us to do about it. These look like natural phenomena to me." "Natural?" I asked. The hunger was waking up inside me, slow and warm like a cat stretching. You think mercury poisoning is natural? Another man, younger with soft hands that had never done real work, laughed. Officer, I think you've been listening to too many conspiracy theories. Our company follows all environmental regulations. I could smell the lie on him like rotting meat. What about the midnight dumping? I asked. The trucks that come when no one's watching? The barrels you sink in the deep parts of the lake? Their smiles got tighter. The hawk-faced man leaned back in his chair. I think you're confused, he said. Maybe you should talk to your supervisor about these fantasies. My supervisor, I said, is the forest, the lake, the fish that used to swim here before you killed them. I stood up, and they all seemed to get smaller in their chairs. The room felt different now, like the air was getting thicker. You want to know what's natural? I asked. Predators eating things that are bad for the ecosystem. That's very natural. The soft-handed man started to stand up. I think we're done here. Security will escort you out. Security is asleep, I said, and we're not done. We're just getting started. The lights in the room flickered. Outside, snow had started falling again, but inside it was getting very warm. The hawk-faced man was sweating now. What do you want? He asked. I want you to tell me the truth, I said. About what you put in the water, about the children getting sick, about the families you've destroyed. We don't know what you're talking about, the youngest one said, but his voice cracked like a teenager's. I walked around the table slowly, looking at each of them. They were all the same, soft men who had never been hungry, never been cold, never had to choose between food and heat. They ate the world because they could, because no one had ever stopped them. Let me tell you a story, I said, about my grandmother. She lived through a war where people ate bark soup and fought over scraps of bread. She told me that hunger changes people, makes them do things they never thought they could do. I stopped behind the hawk-faced man's chair and put my hands on his shoulders. He went very still. But you know what she never told me, I whispered, that some people deserve to be hungry. The room went completely dark. In the blackness, I heard them scrambling, trying to find the door, bumping into furniture, but I could see perfectly. I could smell their fear, sharp and bitter like burned coffee. The soft-handed man found the light switch, but nothing happened. When he flipped it, the youngest one was crying quietly in the corner. Please, the hawk-faced man said. We can fix this. We can clean up the lake. We can make donations. With what money? I asked from somewhere in the darkness. The money you made poisoning children? The money you stole from workers' pensions? I was moving around them now, just outside their sight. They huddled together like sheep, and I was the wolf they'd forgotten existed. You've been feeding for so long, I said, taking and taking, until you forgot you were part of what you were destroying. But everything eats and everything gets eaten. That's the real natural law. When the lights came back on, only one of them was left. The youngest one pressed against the wall with tears on his face. The others were gone, but their clothes were there, folded neatly on their chairs. Why? The young man whispered. I looked at him carefully. He was scared, but underneath the fear, I could smell something else. Guilt, real guilt, not just fear of getting caught. How old are you? I asked. 26, he said. How long have you worked here? 3 months. I sat down across from him. The hunger was quiet now, satisfied but still watching. Tell me about the dumping, I said. He told me everything. About the trucks that came at night, about the barrels full of chemicals, about the orders from the men who were no longer sitting at this table. He told me about the reports they buried and the inspectors they paid off. He also told me about the memo he'd tried to write, warning about the health risks, how they'd threatened to fire him if he sent it, how he'd been trying to figure out what to do. When he finished talking, I stood up. Clean it up, I said. All of it. You're in charge now. He nodded quickly. Yes, Yes, I will. I promise. Good, I said, because I'll be watching. And if you don't, I didn't need to finish the sentence. He understood. I walked out of the paper mill into the cold night air. Behind me, lights were coming on all over the building. Workers were arriving for the morning shift, but they would find a very different company than the one they'd left yesterday. As I drove home, I could see the lake in my rearview mirror. Even in the darkness, it looked cleaner, healthier, like something that had been sick for a long time was finally starting to heal. The hunger was quiet now, but not gone. It was patient, waiting, because there were other mills, other factories, the men in suits who thought they could eat the world without consequences, but they were wrong. The world was eating back now. 6 months later, everything had changed. The young executive kept his promise. The paper mill stopped dumping chemicals in the lake. They spent millions cleaning up the mess his bosses had made. When the EPA came to inspect, they found the cleanest operation in the state. Other companies got the message too. Word spread. Quietly through boardrooms and executive offices. Bad things happened to people who poisoned the water. Very bad things. The lake healed faster than anyone thought possible. Fish came back in numbers that amazed the scientists. The water ran clear again, and children could swim without getting sick. The Ojibwe families returned to their traditional fishing and rice-gathering spots. Robert and I met every week now. He taught me about the old ways, about balance and respect. He said I was learning to be human. Again, just a different kind of human than I used to be. The Wendigo sleeps now, he told me one evening as we sat by the lake. But it's still there, waiting. That's good. The world needs something to be afraid of. I still worked as a park ranger, but my job was different now. I didn't just protect the wilderness from people. I protected people from the kind of greed that would destroy everything. Most days, I felt normal. I drank coffee, read books, talked to visitors about where to find the best fishing spots. But sometimes, when I heard about a company cutting corners or a politician taking bribes, I would feel the hunger stir. It never went away completely. It was always there, quiet and patient, like a guard dog that slept with one eye open. People started coming to the area again. Families brought their children to see the clear water and catch fish that was safe to eat. The Boundary Waters became a place of healing instead of a place of death. But I made sure everyone understood the rules. I visited every company that did business near the lake. I sat in their offices and explained how things worked now. I was polite and professional, but they all understood what I really was. They could smell it on me, even if they didn't know what they were smelling. The lake is watching, I would tell them, and so am I. Most of them listened. The smart ones changed their ways and found cleaner methods. The stubborn ones usually had accidents. Industrial accidents, they called them. Very unfortunate. The hunger was selective now. It only came for those who truly deserved it. People who hurt children with their pollution. Executives who knowingly poisoned communities. Politicians who sold their votes to the highest bidder. I became very good at finding them. One night, I got a call from a town 300 miles away. A mining company was dumping acid into a river where kids played. The local officials had been paid to look the other way. I drove there in the darkness, my truck eating up the miles, like I was eating up the distance between justice and injustice. When I arrived, I could smell the corruption before I saw it. It hung over the town like smoke. By morning, the mining company had new management. The old management was simply gone, leaving behind only their empty suits and a promise written in blood that the dumping would stop immediately. Word spread faster after that. Environmental crimes dropped across the entire region. Companies started competing to be the cleanest, the most responsible. No one wanted to be visited by the thing that lived in the Boundary Waters. They gave it different names. The lake monster, the environmental avenger, the green death. But Robert and I knew what it really was. It was balance. It was the price of forgetting that everything is connected. Years passed. I got older, but the hunger stayed young. My hair turned grey, but my teeth stayed sharp. I retired from the park service officially, but I never really stopped working. New executives came and went. Most of them learned quickly. A few didn't. Those few became lessons for the others. The lake stayed clean, the fish stayed healthy. Children grew up drinking pure water and breathing clean air. The Ojibwe traditions flourished again, and people from all backgrounds learned to live in harmony with the land. I bought a small cabin right on the shore and spent my days watching the water. Visitors sometimes asked me about the old stories, about what had happened to all those executives who disappeared in the 1970s. The lake remembers everything, I would tell them, and it pays back what it's owed. They thought I was just a crazy old woman telling spooky stories. That was fine with me. The best guardians are the ones no one sees coming. At night I would walk along the shore and listen to the water. Sometimes I could hear voices in the waves, not the voices of the dead, but the voices of all the living things that had been saved. Fish and birds, trees and children, all singing together in a harmony that most people had forgotten was possible. The hunger still lived inside me, patient and eternal. It would always be there, waiting for the next person who thought they could take everything and give nothing back. Because that's what the Wendigo really was. Not a monster, but a teacher. A reminder that in a world where everything is connected, nothing goes unpunished forever. The lake was clean now. The air was pure. The children were safe. And somewhere deep in the water, in the oldest parts of the forest, in the spaces between what people could see and what they feared, something was always watching, always hungry, always ready to restore the balance when greedy men forgot their place in the world. The boundary waters were protected now, and they always would be, because I was the hunger below, and I would never sleep again. My name is Patricia Blackhorse, and I think I'm going crazy. It's Monday morning again, the same Monday morning I've lived 4 times before. I know this because I remember everything, every single detail, every conversation, every terrible thing that's about to happen. I wake up in my small ranger cabin on the Olympic Peninsula at exactly 6:47 a.m. The same dream always ends the same way. Giant birds with eyes like lightning and forests screaming as chainsaws tear them apart. My coffee mug sits on the nightstand, the one with the crack shaped like a lightning bolt. I know that in exactly 3 minutes, my radio will crackle to life. Patricia, you there? It's my supervisor, Jake. Always the same words, same tired voice. I'm here, Jake. I already know what he's going to say, but I have to play along. What choice do I have? Corporate boys from Pacific Timber are coming today. 7 days to clear the old forest before the court order runs out. We need you to escort them, make sure they stay in the approved zones. 7 days. That's all we have left to save the ancient trees that have stood here for over 1,000 years. Trees older than any church, older than any city, home to the spotted owls that everyone says don't matter anymore. But here's the thing that makes my skin crawl. I've tried to stop this before. 4 times. And every time I fail, I wake up on this same Monday morning, trapped like a bug in glass. The first time, I thought it was just a weird dream. The second time, I got scared. By the third time, I started taking notes, trying to understand what was happening to me. Now, on this 5th loop, I know every word that will be spoken, every move the timber company will make. I dress quickly in my ranger uniform, the same green shirt and brown pants I've worn in this exact moment 5 times. Now, my reflection in the mirror looks tired, older somehow. My black hair has more grey streaks than it should for someone who's only 32. Or maybe I'm older now. Does time even work the same way when you're living the same week over and over? My grandmother used to tell me stories about time being like a river that sometimes flows backward. She was Lakota, full of old wisdom that I never really understood until now. She said some people were chosen to see things others couldn't, to carry burdens that would break normal folks. I drive my truck down the winding forest road, knowing exactly where each pothole will be, where the deer will cross, where I'll see the first corporate vehicles parked like metal vultures at the forest edge. The morning mist clings to the trees, like ghosts, and I can almost hear them whispering warnings. The Pacific timber trucks are already there, 5 of them, loaded with equipment that can cut down a tree older than America in less than an hour. Men in hard hats stand around drinking coffee and laughing. They have no idea they're about to destroy something sacred, something that can never be replaced. And they have no idea that a half-crazy park ranger has been watching them do this. Exact same thing 4 times before, learning their patterns, waiting for the right moment to stop them. The question that keeps me awake at night is simple. Why me? Why am I the only one who remembers? And what happens if I fail again? Because deep in my bones, I know this can't go on forever. Something is giving me these chances for a reason, and I'm running out of time to figure out what that reason is. The forest is counting on me. The owls are counting on me. Maybe the whole world is counting on me, and I'm just one person, stuck in time, watching the same nightmare play out over and over again. The man in the expensive suit walks toward me, with his hand out and a fake smile. Richard Mason, the Pacific Timber supervisor. I know everything about him now. I know he drinks 3 cups of coffee before noon. I know he calls his workers boys, even though some of them have gray hair. I know he doesn't care about anything except getting these trees cut down fast. "You must be our park ranger escort," he says, shaking my hand too hard. His grip is meant to hurt, to show me who's boss. Richard Mason, operations manager. Patricia Blackhorse. I keep my voice steady, even though I want to scream at him. I've heard this same conversation 4 times before. "Let's get one thing straight, Patricia." He leans closer, and I smell coffee and cigarettes on his breath. "We're not here to make friends with trees. We've got 7 days to harvest this timber, and we're going to do it. Your job is to keep us legal, not to slow us down." Behind him, workers are already unloading chainsaws, marking equipment, and surveying tools. They move like an army getting ready for war, a war against trees that can't fight back. "These are protected old-growth forests," I say quietly. "There are endangered owls nesting here." Mason laughs, but it's not a happy sound. "Owls don't pay taxes, sweetheart. They don't create jobs. And in 7 days, when that court order expires, this whole section becomes fair game." I watch him walk away, barking orders at his crew. The same orders I've heard before. The same plans that always work because no one believes a park ranger can stop a whole corporation. But I'm not the same ranger I was 4 loops ago. I pull out my notebook, a new one I bought after the 4th loop failed. This time, I'm writing down everything. Every truck license plate, every worker's name, every tool they bring in. I know their schedule better than they do now. By 10 a.m., they'll start marking trees. By lunch, they'll have picked out which giants will fall first. By Wednesday, the chainsaws will start. By Friday, if nothing changes, the first 1,000-year-old trees will be lying dead on the ground. And by Sunday night, I'll be back in my bed, waking up to Monday morning all over again. Unless I can find a way to stop them. The problem is, I've tried everything normal people would try. I've called environmental groups. They say their lawyers are working on it. I've contacted reporters. They say it's not big enough news. I've even tried calling the police, but the timber company has all the right permits. Legal doesn't mean right, but in the real world, legal usually wins. I watch Mason's crew spread out through the forest like a disease. They see bored feet and profit margins. I see living cathedrals, homes for creatures that will never find another place like this. A spotted owl calls from somewhere deep in the trees. It sounds sad, like it knows what's coming. Mason pulls out his phone and starts talking loud enough for everyone to hear. Yeah, Bob, we're on schedule. Weather looks good all week. No problems from the locals so far. He glances at me and smirks. Just one ranger, and she seems harmless enough. Harmless, that's what he thinks. But I'm not the same person who failed 4 times before. I'm someone who has lived this week over and over, someone who has learned their secrets, someone who remembers things that haven't happened yet. I'm someone who is running out of patience. The owl calls again, and this time it sounds like a warning. That evening I drive to the small house where William Seahorse lives. He's 83 years old, a Kino elder who knows more about these forests than any book or college course could teach. I visited him in every loop, but this time feels different. This time, I'm desperate enough to listen to things that sound impossible. His house sits at the edge of the reservation, old but solid, with a garden full of plants I can't name. Smoke rises from his chimney, and I can smell cedar burning. William is waiting for me on his porch, rocking slowly in an old wooden chair. "You look tired, Patricia," he says before I even get out of my truck. His voice is gentle but strong, like water running over stones. Tired like someone who's been carrying the same heavy load for too long. I sit down on his porch steps. The sun is setting behind the trees, painting everything gold and red. "William, I need to ask you something, and I need you to not think I'm crazy." He laughs, a warm sound. "Child, I'm 83 years old. I've seen plenty of things that would sound crazy to most folks. Try me." So I tell him everything. About waking up the same morning 5 times, about watching the timber company make the same plans, speak the same words, laugh at the same jokes, about failing to stop them over and over again. William listens without saying a word. He doesn't look surprised or worried. He just nods sometimes, like I'm telling him something he already knows. When I finish, he's quiet for a long time. A nightbird calls from the forest, and somewhere far away, a truck engine rumbles on the highway. "My grandmother told me about this," he finally says. "She called it the Thunderbird's gift. When the earth is in great danger, when people have forgotten how to listen, sometimes time bends, gives us extra chances to choose the right path." "Thunderbird?" I ask. My own grandmother told me stories about Thunderbird, but they were just stories, weren't they? Great spirit of the sky, protector of the earth. When humans threaten the balance of all living things, Thunderbird sometimes steps in. William looks at me with eyes that have seen many things. "But the gift doesn't last forever. 7 chances, my grandmother said. 7 chances to save the 7th generation. 7 chances. I'm on my 5th loop." "What happens if I fail all 7 times?" I ask, though I'm not sure I want to know. William's face grows sad. "Then the damage becomes permanent. Not just the trees, Patricia. The whole web of life starts to unravel. When one piece breaks, everything else starts falling apart." A chill runs down my spine. I think about the spotted owls, about all the creatures that depend on these ancient trees. If the old forest dies, what else dies with it? "But why me?" I ask. "I'm just a park ranger. I'm not special." "You're more than you think," William says softly. "Your grandmother was Lakota. Your grandfather came from Ireland. Both peoples who understand that the earth is alive, that we're all connected. And you work to protect the land every day. That makes you exactly the right person." He stands up slowly and goes into his house. When he comes back, he's carrying something wrapped in soft deerskin. He unwraps it carefully, showing me a small stone carved into the shape of a bird with wings spread wide. "This belonged to my grandmother," he says, pressing it into my hands. "She said it would help the chosen one hear what the forest is trying to say." The stone is warm, warmer than it should be. For just a moment I swear I hear something, not with my ears, but deeper, like voices calling from far away. "The timber people don't know what they're really doing," William continues. "They think they're just cutting trees for money. but they're about to break something that took 1,000 years to grow. Some things, once broken, can never be fixed. I look at the small stone bird in my palm. It seems to pulse with its own heartbeat. What am I supposed to do, I ask. You'll know when the time comes, William says. But remember, you're not fighting alone. The forest has been waiting for someone who could hear its voice, and sometimes when the need is great, enough, even the sky itself will come down to help. Thunder rumbles in the distance, though the sky was clear just minutes ago. I drive home with the stone bird in my pocket, feeling its warmth against my leg. For the first time in 5 loops, I don't feel completely helpless. I don't understand what's happening to me, but at least now I know I'm not going crazy. I drive home with the stone bird in my pocket, feeling its warmth against my leg. For the first time in 5 loops, I don't feel completely helpless. I don't understand what's happening to me, but at least now I know I'm not going crazy. The forest is trying to save itself, and somehow I'm its last hope. Wednesday morning of the 5th loop starts different. I wake up, not to my alarm, but to the sound of wings, huge wings, beating the air outside my cabin like helicopter blades. I stumble to the window and look out. The sky is still dark, but something massive moves through the clouds. Lightning flickers, but there's no rain, no storm. Just those wings and a shadow bigger than any airplane. The stone bird in my pocket burns hot against my skin. I get dressed fast and drive toward the forest. I know the timber crew will be starting. Their chainsaws today. I've watched it happen 4 times before, but something tells me this time will be different. The massive bird shadow follows me, staying just out of clear sight in the grey morning sky. When I reach the forest, Mason's crew is already there. The chainsaws are loud and angry, biting into the first ancient tree. A 1,000-year-old giant starts to lean, starts to fall. And that's when the sky explodes. Lightning strikes the ground right between me and the timber crew. Not the kind of lightning that comes with storms. This lightning is different. It's alive, purposeful. The men drop their saws and run, shouting and pointing at the sky. Above us, something incredible unfolds its wings. The Thunderbird is real. It's not like the pictures in children's books. It's enormous, bigger than a house, with feathers that seem to be made of storm clouds and lightning. Its eyes glow like car headlights, and when it calls out, the sound shakes the ground beneath my feet. The timber workers huddle behind there, trucks too scared to move. Mason is yelling into his phone, but I can't hear what he's saying over the thunder. The great bird lands on the half-cut tree, its talons gripping the ancient bark. When it looks at me, I feel something shift inside my head, like a door opening. "Child of 2 peoples," a voice says, but not with words. The voice comes from inside. My thoughts warm and deep like William's grandmother's stories. "You have been chosen to speak for those who cannot speak." I can't move, can't breathe. The stone bird in my pocket is so hot it almost burns. "You have lived this pain 5 times, the voice continues. "You have watched the sacred trees fall, watched the small winged ones lose their homes. How many times will you let this happen?" "I don't know how to stop them," I whisper. "I'm just one person." The Thunderbird tilts its massive head. "Listen." And suddenly, impossibly, I can hear them. The trees, they're not screaming like in my dreams. They're singing. Sad, ancient songs about seasons and storms, about the small creatures they've sheltered, about the long years they've stood watching over this place. The old tree beneath the Thunderbird's feet hums with a voice older than any human memory. "We do not wish to die for money. We wish to live for life." The spotted owls call from their nests, and now I understand their language too. They're not just birds. They're part of something bigger, a web that connects everything in the forest. When they disappear, the web starts to break. "Show them," the Thunderbird says. "Show the tree killers what they truly destroy." The great bird spreads its wings, and lightning dances between its feathers. Every person in the forest, Mason, his workers, even me, suddenly sees what I'm seeing, hears what I'm hearing. The timber workers drop to their knees. One of them starts crying. Mason stares up at the Thunderbird with his mouth open, his phone forgotten in his hand. 7 chances, the Thunderbird says to me. This is your 5th. Use what you have learned. Use what you now know. The earth cannot wait much longer. Thunder rolls across the sky, and the great bird lifts off. Its wings create wind that bends. The trees, and then it's gone, vanished into clouds that weren't there a moment before. The forest is quiet except for the sound of grown men weeping. Mason looks at me with eyes full of fear and confusion. What was that thing? I touch the stone bird in my pocket. It's cool now, calm. That was your warning, I tell him, and mine. For the first time in 5 loops, the chainsaws stay silent for the rest of the day. That night I don't sleep. Instead, I sit at my kitchen table with 5 notebooks spread out in front of me. Each one is from a different loop, filled with everything I've learned about Pacific Timber, their schedules, their weaknesses. Now I know something they don't. I can hear what the forest is really saying. And I know the Thunderbird is real, waiting somewhere in the storm clouds. But I also know Mason. By tomorrow morning, he'll convince himself that what happened today was just freak weather. He'll tell his bosses it was lightning and wind, nothing more. Fear fades fast when there's money involved. I have to be smarter. This time, I pull out my phone and start making calls. First, I call every environmental lawyer I've found over the past 4 loops. I give them the exact legal arguments that worked in other states, cases they haven't thought of yet. I sound crazy talking about court decisions that might not even exist, but some of them listen. Next, I call reporters, not the big city ones, who ignored me before, but the small-town journalists who care about local stories. I tell them to be at the forest on Friday morning with cameras. I don't explain how I know something big will happen then. Then I call the tribal council. William has been preparing them, I can tell. They don't ask many questions when I tell them we need to organize a protest for Thursday. They just say they'll be there. By 3 a.m., I've made 37 phone calls. My voice is hoarse, but I can feel the pieces starting to fall into place. The next morning, Mason shows up at my cabin before I even leave for work. He looks tired, older somehow. The Thunderbird encounter has shaken him more than he wants to admit. We need to talk, he says. I let him in and pour coffee. He sits at my kitchen table right next to my notebooks. I watch his eyes scan the pages, the detailed schedules, the equipment lists, the worker profiles, information I shouldn't have. How do you know all this? He asks quietly. I could tell him the truth, about the time loops, about living this week over and over. But he's not ready for that truth yet. I pay attention, I say instead. I watch, I listen. He picks up one of my notebooks and flips through it. You know what equipment we're bringing before we bring it. You know which trees my crew will mark before they mark them. That's not just paying attention. I sit across from him and look him in the eye. Richard, what did you see yesterday in the forest? His hands shake a little as he puts down the notebook. I heard... He stops, shakes his head. It was just a storm, weird weather. No, it wasn't. Don't tell me what I saw. His voice gets loud, angry. But behind the anger, I hear fear. You heard the trees talking, I say softly. You felt what it would be like when they're all gone, when there's nothing left but empty ground and dead silence. Mason stands up fast, his chair scraping against the floor. Trees don't talk. That's impossible. So is lightning that strikes on command. So is wind that only blows when something wants it to blow. He stares at me, for a long moment. What are you? I'm someone who's trying to save something precious, I tell him. And I'm someone who's learned not to give up. He leaves without saying goodbye, but I can see the doubt in his eyes. The certainty he had when he first arrived is cracking. Good. Thursday comes, and for the first time in any loop I'm ready. The tribal protesters arrive just after sunrise, carrying signs and drums. They set up a peaceful camp right at the forest entrance. William is with them, wearing traditional clothes and carrying an eagle feather. The reporters show up around noon, drawn by my mysterious phone calls and the unusual protest. They interview William, who tells them old stories about the sacred nature of ancient forests. The environmental lawyers I called start filing emergency injunctions in 3 different courts. I gave them the exact wording that worked in Oregon and Montana, cases they never would have thought to use. Mason's crew arrives to find their work site surrounded by people with cameras and legal papers. They mill around uncertainly, unsure what to do, and Mason stands at the edge of it all, watching me. He knows somehow that I've orchestrated this. He just doesn't understand how. That evening, as the sun sets, I walk to the edge of the old forest. The trees rustle in the wind, and now I can hear their voices clearly. They're excited, hopeful. They know something is different this time. William joins me, his old hands steady on his walking stick. Tomorrow, he says, it ends one way or another. I touch the stone bird in my pocket. It's warm again, ready. 5 loops, I whisper. If this fails, I only get 2 more chances. Then don't fail, William says simply. The forest is counting on you. The owls are counting on you. All the generations not yet born are counting on you. Thunder rumbles overhead, and I look up to see a familiar shadow moving through the clouds. Tomorrow, everything changes, one way or another. Friday morning arrives grey and heavy, like the sky itself is holding its breath. I wake up knowing this is it. The moment when everything I've learned across 5 loops either saves the forest or fails forever. I'm at the forest before dawn, watching Mason's trucks roll in. His crew looks nervous. Yesterday's protests and legal papers have rattled them. They keep glancing at the tree line like they expect something to jump out. Mason steps out of his truck, and I can see he barely slept. His expensive suit is wrinkled, his hair messy. The confident businessman from Loop 1 is gone. In his place stands a man who's seen something that shook his world. "Morning, Patricia," he says, trying to sound normal. It doesn't work. "Morning. Richard, still planning to cut down the forest today?" He pulls out a stack of papers. "Got the final court clearance an hour ago. Whatever legal tricks you pulled yesterday, they didn't stick. We start cutting in 10 minutes. But I hear the doubt in his voice. He's going through the motions because he doesn't know what else to do. The tribal protesters return, more of them this time. William leads them in a quiet song, their voices mixing with the morning wind. The reporters set up their cameras. The lawyers make final phone calls. Everything is in place, just like I planned. At exactly 8 a.m., Mason nods to his crew. "Fire up the saws." The chainsaws roar to life, their angry buzz cutting through the morning peace. The workers move toward the first ancient tree, the same. When the Thunderbird landed on 2 days ago, that's when I step forward. "Stop," I say, loud enough for everyone to hear. Mason laughs, but it sounds forced. "You can't stop us, Patricia. We have every legal right to be here." Legal doesn't make it right. I reach into my pocket and pull out the stone bird. It's burning hot now, almost too hot to hold. I raise it above my head, and suddenly the morning air feels electric. "You want to know what I am, Richard? I'm someone who's lived this moment 5 times. I'm someone who's watched you destroy this forest over and over, and I'm someone who's finally learned how to fight back." The sky darkens. Wind picks up, making the trees sway and whisper. Mason's workers stop their chainsaws, looking around, nervously. "Just keep cutting," Mason shouts, but his voice cracks. That's when the Thunderbird comes, not hidden in clouds this time. It swoops down from the grey sky in full view of everyone. The workers, the protesters, the reporters with their cameras rolling. Its wings span wider than the forest road, and lightning dances between its feathers. It lands on the same ancient tree, just like before, but this time, when it speaks, everyone can hear it. Enough! The word hits like thunder, shaking the ground. Mason falls to his knees. His workers drop their chainsaws and run for their trucks, but the reporters keep filming, their eyes wide with wonder and fear. 5 times you have chosen money over life, the Thunderbird says, its voice filling everyone's mind. 5 times you have ignored the voices of the living world. This is your final warning. The great bird spreads its wings, and suddenly everyone can hear what I've been hearing. The trees singing their ancient songs, the owls calling for their children, the whole forest speaking as one voice, asking simply to be allowed to live. Mason looks up at the Thunderbird with tears streaming down his face. I didn't know. I couldn't hear them before. Now you hear. Now you choose. Will you be a protector of life or a bringer of death? Mason struggles to his feet. He looks at his chainsaws lying silent on the ground, then at the ancient tree rising above him like a living cathedral. I choose life, he whispers. Then louder, I choose life, the Thunderbird calls out, a sound like celebration and triumph mixed together. Lightning flickers across the sky, but it's not scary now. It's beautiful, like the earth itself is smiling. The forest will remember, the great bird says, and the 7th generation will thank you. It spreads its wings and lifts into the sky, circling once before disappearing into clouds that seem to part just for it. The forest falls quiet except for the sound of wind in leaves and the soft singing of the tribal protesters. Mason walks over to me, his expensive suit muddy, his face changed. Patricia, I need to make some phone calls. We're shutting down the operation. What about your bosses, your company? He looks at the ancient trees, and I can see he's still hearing their voices. Let me worry about that. Some things are more important than money. The reporters are going crazy, interviewing everyone, trying to understand what they just witnessed. The lawyers are making new calls about permanent protection orders. The tribal protesters are celebrating, and me, I'm standing in the forest, holding a stone bird that's finally cool in my palm, knowing that for the first time in 5 loops, the chainsaws won't start again on Monday morning, because there won't be another Monday morning, not the same one anyway. The time loop is broken. 3 months later, I wake up on a Monday morning that I've never lived before. The sun streams through my cabin window at a different angle, and my coffee tastes like hope instead of despair. The forest is still there. Every morning, I walk through the ancient trees and listen to their songs. They're happy songs now, full of sunlight and bird calls and the rustle of small creatures going about their lives. The spotted owls have had babies, tiny, fluffy balls of feathers that peep from their nests high in the old branches. Mason kept his word. He went back to Pacific Timber and convinced his bosses to turn the entire area into a nature preserve. It wasn't easy. He told me he had to show them the reporters' videos of the Thunderbird 3 times before they believed him. But when a giant supernatural bird appears on national news, it's hard to argue with. The company now funds forest protection instead of forest destruction. Mason became their head of environmental restoration. He says he can still hear the trees sometimes, especially on quiet mornings. It changes you, he told me last week. Once you hear their voices, you can't pretend they're just wood anymore. William Seahorse comes to visit often. We sit on my porch and drink tea while he tells me more stories about the old ways, about people who could speak with the natural world. He says the Thunderbird hasn't been seen by so many people in over 100 years. You did something special, Patricia. he always says. You reminded the world that everything is connected. The tribal council asked me to teach environmental protection at their community college. I said yes. My students are young people who want to learn how to protect the earth for their children and grandchildren. I teach them about forests and wildlife, but I also teach them to listen, really listen. Some of them are starting to hear the voices too. The reporters' videos went viral around the world. Scientists came to study the forest, expecting to debunk the Thunderbird hoax. Instead, many of them left talking about things they couldn't explain with normal science. A few even started learning from tribal elders about different ways of understanding nature. I keep the stone bird on my desk when I teach. Sometimes, when a student is struggling to understand how all living things are connected, I let them hold it. The stone is always warm, always ready to help people hear what they need to hear. But the most important change is in me. I don't have nightmares anymore. I don't wake up afraid that I'm trapped in the same day forever. Instead, I dream about future forests, about children playing under trees that will live for another 1,000 years. Sometimes on stormy nights, I see the Thunderbird flying through the clouds. It never lands anymore. It doesn't need to. The message has been delivered. The choice has been made. Yesterday, a little girl from the reservation came to class with her grandmother. She was maybe 7 years old, with bright eyes and curious questions. "Ms. Blackhorse," she said, "my grandma says you can talk to trees. Is that true?" I knelt down to her level and smiled. "Would you like to learn how to listen to them?" She nodded eagerly. I took her small hand and walked her to the edge of the forest. The ancient trees swayed gently in the afternoon breeze, their leaves whispering, secrets older than any human memory. "Close your eyes," I told her. "Be very quiet and just listen." We stood there together for several minutes. Then her eyes popped open, wide with wonder. "They're singing," she whispered. "The trees are singing." And they were. The same ancient songs I've been hearing for months now. Songs about roots deep in the earth and branches reaching for the sky. Songs about the spotted owls and the tiny mice and the bears that sleep in winter. Songs about the connection between all living things. Songs about hope. The little girl squeezed my hand. "Will you teach me more words to their songs?" "I'll teach you everything I know," I promised, because that's what this was all about. Not just saving one forest, but teaching people to hear the voice of the living world, teaching them that we're all part of the same story, the same song. The Thunderbird gave me 7 chances to get it right. I only needed 5. But the real gift wasn't the extra chances. The real gift was learning that one person, listening carefully and refusing to give up, can change everything. As the sun sets behind the ancient trees, I hear the spotted owls calling to their young. It's a sound I never got tired of hearing, a sound that means the future is still possible. And somewhere high above the clouds, thunder rumbles softly, like distant applause. The forest remembers. The 7th generation will thank us, and the story continues, one listener at a time. My name is Patricia Blackhorse, and I think I'm going crazy. It's Monday morning again. The same Monday morning I've lived 4 times before. I know this because I remember everything, every single detail, every conversation, every terrible thing that's about to happen. I wake up in my small ranger cabin on the Olympic Peninsula at exactly 6:47 a.m. The same dream always ends the same way. Giant birds with eyes like lightning and forests screaming as chainsaws tear them apart. My coffee mug sits on the nightstand, the one with the crack shaped like a lightning bolt. I know that in exactly 3 minutes, my radio will crackle to life. "Patricia, you there?" It's my supervisor, Jake. Always the same words, same tired voice. "I'm here, Jake." I already know what he's going to say, but I have to play along. What choice do I have? Corporate boys from Pacific Timber are coming today. 7 days to clear the old forest before the court order runs out. We need you to escort them, make sure they stay in the approved zones. 7 days. That's all we have left to save the ancient trees that have stood here for over 1,000 years. Trees older than any church, older than any city. Home to the spotted owls that everyone says don't matter anymore. But here's the thing that makes my skin crawl. I've tried to stop this before. 4 times. And every time I fail, I wake up on this same Monday morning, trapped like a bug in glass. The first time I thought it was just a weird dream. The second time I got scared. By the third time, I started taking notes, trying to understand what was happening to me. Now, on this 5th loop, I know every word that will be spoken, every move the timber company will make. I dress quickly in my ranger uniform, the same green shirt and brown pants I've worn in this exact moment 5 times. Now, my reflection in the mirror looks tired, older somehow. My black hair has more grey streaks than it should for someone who's only 32. Or maybe I'm older now. Does time even work the same way when you're living the same week over and over? My grandmother used to tell me stories about time being like a river that sometimes flows backward. She was Lakota, full of old wisdom that I never really understood until now. She said some people were chosen to see things others couldn't, to carry burdens that would break normal folks. I drive my truck down the winding forest road, knowing exactly where each pothole will be, where the deer will cross, where I'll see the first corporate vehicles parked like metal vultures at the forest edge. The morning mist clings to the trees, like ghosts, and I can almost hear them whispering warnings. The Pacific Timber trucks are already there, 5 of them, loaded with equipment that can cut down a tree older than America in less than an hour. Men in hard hats stand around drinking coffee and laughing. They have no idea they're about to destroy something sacred, something that can never be replaced. And they have no idea that a half-crazy park ranger has been watching them do this. Exact same thing 4 times before. Learning their patterns, waiting for the right moment to stop them. The question that keeps me awake at night is simple. Why me? Why am I the only one who remembers? And what happens if I fail again? Because deep in my bones, I know this can't go on forever. Something is giving me these chances for a reason, and I'm running out of time to figure out what that reason is. The forest is counting on me. The owls are counting on me. Maybe the whole world is counting on me. And I'm just one person, stuck in time, watching the same nightmare play out over and over again. My name is David Strongbear, and I work as a park ranger in Yellowstone. I'm 31 years old, and my life changed forever the day the mountains started talking to me. It began 3 months ago when the ground started shaking more than usual. Not big earthquakes, just little trembles that made the coffee cups rattle on my desk. The government scientists said it was normal. Nothing to worry about, they told everyone on TV. Yellowstone does this sometimes, but I knew something was wrong. Every time the earth shook, even just a tiny bit, pain shot through my body like lightning. My head would pound, and my chest felt like someone was squeezing it tight. The other, rangers thought I was getting sick, or maybe just stressed out. The real trouble started when the drilling companies showed up. Big men in expensive suits came to our office, talking about geothermal energy. They wanted to drill holes near Old Faithful, the famous geyser that brings millions of visitors to the park every year. Think of all the clean energy we could make, they said, spreading maps across my boss's desk. Just a few small holes. Won't hurt anything. But I could feel the mountain's anger building under my feet. Mary Birdcloud knew what was happening. She's an elder from the Crow tribe, and she's been coming to the park for 70 years. Her grandmother brought her here as a little girl, and now she brings her own grandchildren. You're disturbing the earth's breathing, she told me one morning as we stood watching Old Faithful shoot water high into the sky. The mountain is alive, David. It has feelings, just like you and me. The government geologists laughed when I told them what Mary said. Superstition, they called it. These old stories don't mean anything in the real world. But Mary wasn't finished talking. She grabbed my arm with her wrinkled hands and looked straight into my eyes. "Your grandmother told me you'd be the one," she said. "Half Lakota, half German, 2 worlds in one body. The earth needs someone who can speak both languages." I didn't understand what she meant then. My grandmother died when I was 12, but I still remembered her stories about the spirits in the mountains. My father always said those were just old tales, nothing scientific about them. He wanted me to focus on my college studies, to become a real scientist. The pain in my body got worse as more drilling equipment arrived. Giant trucks carried huge metal machines up the mountain roads. Every night I went to bed with my bones aching like I had the flu. Then the hot springs started, changing. New ones appeared overnight, bubbling up through the ground in places where there had never been water before. The old ones got hotter, so hot they killed the trees and grass around them. Dead fish floated in streams that had been full of life just weeks before. The animals knew something was wrong too. Bears that usually came near the roads stayed deep. In the forest, birds flew away from areas where the drilling was supposed to happen. Even the buffalo acted strange, gathering together in big groups near the sacred sites Mary had shown me years ago. "The earth is trying to tell us something," Mary said when I told her about the animals. "But nobody's listening. Nobody except me. Because every day the pain in my body taught me a new word in the mountains language. When the drill bits hit rock, my teeth hurt. When they pumped chemicals into the ground, my stomach burned. When they set off explosions to test the rock, my heart felt like it might stop. The corporate men didn't care about my pain. They had meetings with my boss and talked about my diverse background, like I was some kind of prize they could show off. "Strong Bear's perfect for this job," I heard one of them say through the office door. "Native American heritage, college education, works for the government. If he approves our project, nobody can say we didn't listen to indigenous concerns." They offered me money. Not just a little. Enough to help my whole family back on the Pine Ridge Reservation. My cousins needed jobs, my aunt needed medicine, and the house where I grew up needed a new roof. The federal salary I made as a ranger barely covered my own bills, let alone helped my family. But every time I thought about signing those papers, the mountains screamed inside my head. The seismic equipment the scientists brought picked up sounds from deep underground. Sounds that didn't match their computer models of how volcanoes work. The patterns looked almost like communication, like the Earth was trying to send messages, probably just equipment problems, the head scientist said when I showed him the strange readings. "These old machines pick up radio signals sometimes." But I knew better. Late at night, when I walked alone through the park, I could feel something, huge and old, stirring beneath my feet. Something that had been sleeping for a long time and was just starting to wake up. The mountain wasn't just a pile of rock and dirt. It was alive and it was angry, and it was choosing me to be its voice. I just didn't know yet what terrible price I'd have to pay to speak for the earth. The dream started that same week. Every night, I saw 2 different worlds fighting inside my head. In one dream, my Lakota grandmother sat by a fire, telling me that rocks and trees had spirits just like people. In the other dream, my German father stood in a laboratory, showing me charts and numbers that explained everything with science. "Both are true," I whispered when I woke up, but saying it out loud made me feel crazy. During the day, I had to wear my ranger uniform and smile at the corporate men. They treated me like I was their pet, the Indian who would make their project look good. It made my stomach sick, but I needed this job. My family back home was counting on the money I sent them every month. My cousin Jake called that Tuesday. "David, Mom's medicine costs went up again, and the roof started leaking bad when it rained last night. You think you could send a little extra this month?" I looked at the stack of drilling permits on my desk. All I had to do was sign them, and the company would pay me enough to fix everything, enough to take care of everyone. But when I picked up the pen, my hand started shaking so hard I couldn't write my name. That's when I knew something was really changing inside me. The shaking got worse over the next few days. Not just my hands, my whole body would tremble whenever I got near the drilling sites. My boss sent me to the doctor, thinking I had some kind of illness. "Everything looks normal," Dr. Martinez said after running tests. "Maybe you're just stressed. This job can be hard on people." But it wasn't stress. My body was learning to feel what the mountain felt. When they drilled into the rock, my bones ached. When they pumped chemicals into the ground, my skin burned. When they used explosives to break up stone, my heart pounded like it was trying to escape from my chest. Mary Birdcloud found me sitting by Yellowstone Lake one evening, holding my head in my hands. "It hurts, doesn't it?" she said, sitting down beside me on the wooden bench. "How did you know? Your grandmother told me this would happen. She said you'd be the bridge between the old ways and the new ways, but bridges get walked on by both sides." She was quiet for a long time, watching the sunset turn the water orange and pink. Then she started talking about things my grandmother had whispered to me when I was little, things I thought were just bedtime stories. "The earth has a nervous system, just like you do," Mary said. "When someone hurts part of it, the whole body feels pain. Most people can't hear it anymore, but some can. Your mixed blood makes you special. You can understand both the spiritual truth and the scientific truth." "I don't feel special," I said. "I feel like I'm going crazy." Maybe crazy is what the world needs right now. That night, I had the strangest dream yet. I was standing inside the mountain, in a huge cave filled with glowing rocks. The walls were breathing like they were alive, and somewhere in the darkness, something massive was moving toward me. I woke up with my sheets soaked in sweat. The next morning, I noticed my reflection looked different. My eyes seemed brighter, like there was a light shining behind them. My muscles felt stronger but also sore, like I'd been exercising all night without knowing it. At work, I could hear things other people couldn't. The hum of the drilling machines sounded like screaming to me. The seismic equipment picked up rhythms that matched my heartbeat. Even the ground under the office building felt aware. "You're acting weird, Strongbear," my supervisor said during our weekly meeting. "The corporate guys are asking questions. They want someone reliable, not someone who jumps every time a truck backfires." I wanted to tell him that the truck wasn't backfiring. It was the mountain crying out in pain. But I knew he wouldn't believe me. That afternoon, while reviewing more drilling permits, I felt something new. A presence, huge and ancient, pressing against my mind. It wasn't trying to hurt me. It was trying to communicate. Images flashed through my head. I saw Yellowstone from below, a vast network of caves and hot water and melted rock, all connected like blood vessels in a body. I saw the drilling equipment as tiny needles poking into living flesh. I saw the mountain trying to protect itself but not knowing how. And then I saw myself standing in that glowing cave from my dream, but I wasn't alone anymore. Something tall and covered in dark fur stood beside me, its eyes glowing with the same light I'd seen in my own reflection. "What are you?" I whispered to the empty office. The presence in my mind didn't answer with words. Instead, it showed me more pictures. Humans and animals and trees and rocks, all connected by invisible threads of light, all part of one big living system that was trying to survive. I was part of that system now, the bridge Mary had talked about. But being a bridge meant I belonged, fully to neither side. My phone buzzed. Another text from my cousin. "David, really need that money. Can you help?" I looked at the unsigned permits on my desk. Such a simple choice. Sign the papers, get the money, help my family, let the mountains scream, or find another way. My hand moved toward the pen, then stopped. The presence in my mind grew stronger, and for just a moment I could feel what the mountain felt. Not just pain, but something deeper. Love. Ancient, patient love for every living thing on its surface, including me, including my family, including even the corporate men who wanted to hurt it. The mountain wasn't just trying to save itself. It was trying to save all of us. I put the pen down and walked out of the office. I didn't know what I was going to do about the money, or my family, or my job. But I knew I couldn't sign those papers. Not when the earth itself was begging me not to. The drilling company's machines started breaking down 3 days later. Not all at once. That would have been too obvious. First, a drill bit snapped in half while cutting through solid rock. Then a truck's engine died for no reason anyone could figure out. Next, their computer system crashed and wouldn't restart. Bad luck, the corporate supervisor told my boss. These things happen. But I knew better. Every time a machine broke, I felt a small pulse of satisfaction deep in my chest, like the mountain was smiling. The earthquakes were getting stronger too, still small ones that most people barely noticed. But they came at exactly the right times, always when the drilling crews were trying to set up their equipment, always just strong enough to make the workers nervous and slow down their work. "It's like the mountain doesn't want us here," one of the drillers joked over coffee at the visitor center. He had no idea how right he was. That Thursday night, I couldn't sleep. The presence in my mind felt stronger than ever, pulling me toward something. I got dressed and walked out into the darkness, letting my feet follow paths I'd never seen before. The moon was full, turning everything silver and strange. I walked for what felt like hours, through forests and across streams, until I found myself in a clearing I'd never seen in 10 years of working in the park. Steam rose from natural hot springs, and the air smelled like sulfur and something else, something wild and ancient. My whole body was tingling, like electricity was running through my veins. That's when I saw it. At first, I thought it was just a big tree moving in the wind, but trees don't have eyes that glow in the dark. It stood at least 8 feet tall, covered in dark brown fur that looked almost black in the moonlight. Its arms were longer than a person's, and its shoulders were so wide it could have wrapped me in a hug and made me disappear. But I wasn't scared. I should have been terrified, but instead I felt peaceful, like I was meeting an old friend. It looked at me for a long time, those glowing eyes studying my face. Then it opened its mouth and made a sound, not quite a roar, not quite a voice, but something that seemed to come from deep inside the earth itself. And somehow, I understood. "You're like me," I whispered. "You're part of the mountain too." It nodded once, then turned and walked away. But before it disappeared into the trees, it looked back at me, and I saw something that made my heart stop. Its face. Under all that fur, its face looked almost human, like someone who had been a person once, but had become something more. Something the mountain had made. I walked home in a daze, but I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen. The next morning, I started noticing things I'd missed before. My hands were getting bigger. Not much, just enough that my gloves felt tight. My hearing was sharper too. I could pick up conversations from across the visitor center, and sometimes I heard sounds that seemed to come from underground. At lunch, Mary Birdcloud sat down at my table without being invited. "You met one of them, didn't you?" she said quietly. "One of what?" "The guardians, the mountain's children. My grandmother called them the earth spirits, but white people have a different name for them." "Sasquatch," I breathed. She nodded. "When the earth is in danger, it chooses people to help protect it. But they can't stay fully human anymore. They become something in between, strong enough to fight for the mountain, but still human enough to understand both worlds." My stomach dropped. Is that what's happening to me? "What do you think?" I looked down at my hands. They definitely looked bigger than yesterday. and when I touched the metal table, I could swear I felt it bend slightly under my fingers. That afternoon, the drilling company lost 3 more machines. Their main computer system fried completely, even though there hadn't been any lightning. A truck full of expensive equipment rolled backward down a hill, even though the driver swore he'd set the brake. "It's sabotage," the corporate supervisor announced at an emergency meeting. "Someone's trying to stop our project." He was right, but he had no idea who was doing it. I did, though. Every time I walked past one of their machines, I felt that same pulse of satisfaction. And sometimes, just for a second, I could sense what the machine was thinking. Its circuits and gears and computer chips all working together like a tiny metal brain. A brain that I could somehow influence. That night, I tested it. I stood outside the equipment yard and focused on one of the big drilling rigs. I imagined its engine coughing and dying, its computer screen going dark. 10 minutes later, 2 security guards ran out to check on the machine that had suddenly shut down for no reason. The power was growing stronger every day. But so was the change in my body. My clothes didn't fit right anymore. My muscles felt like steel cables under my skin. When I looked in mirrors, my reflection seemed to shift and blur, like I was turning into someone else. Someone, or something, else. The other park rangers started avoiding me, not because they were scared exactly, but because something deep in their brains was telling them I wasn't quite human anymore. They were right. Friday morning brought news that made my heart race. The drilling company had given up on their first site and was moving their equipment to a new location, right next to Yellowstone Lake, where families came to fish and kids played on the beaches. I felt the mountain's rage hit me like a physical blow. Pain shot through my head so sharp I had to grab onto my desk to keep from falling down. No, not there, not where the children play. That night, I walked back to the clearing where I'd met the Sasquatch. This time, it was waiting for me. But it wasn't alone. 3 more stood with it, all different sizes, but all with those same glowing eyes, all looking at me like they'd been expecting me. The biggest one stepped forward and placed a massive hand on my shoulder. Its touch was gentle, but I could feel the strength in those fingers, strength enough to crush steel or uproot trees. Images flashed through my mind again. The mountain's consciousness, vast and patient and loving. The network of caves and springs and living rock that stretched for miles underground. The way everything was connected. Animals, plants, water, stone, and now me. I understood then what Mary had been trying to tell me. The Sasquatch weren't monsters or myths. They were people, like me, who had been chosen by the earth, changed by it, made into something that could protect it when humans wouldn't listen to reason. "How many of us are there?" I asked. The answer came not in words, but in feelings. Dozens, maybe hundreds, scattered across mountains and forests around the world. All of us caught between 2 worlds, all of us serving the same ancient purpose. Guardians, protectors, the mountain's immune system, fighting off the infection of greed and destruction. And now I was becoming one of them. The biggest Sasquatch pointed toward the lake where the drilling company was setting up their new site. Its meaning was clear. Time to protect what we love. Time to show them that some things are too sacred to destroy. The mountain made its move on Sunday morning. I woke up to the sound of my phone ringing non-stop. My boss was calling, his voice shaky with panic. "David, you need to get down to the lake right now. Something's happening with the drilling site." I got dressed and drove toward Yellowstone Lake, but I already knew what I'd find. All night long, I'd felt the mountain's anger building like pressure in a teapot. Now it was finally boiling over. The scene at the lake looked like a war zone. Every single piece of drilling equipment was destroyed, but not by explosives or hammers. It looked like the earth itself had reached up and crushed them. One massive drill had been twisted into a pretzel shape. A truck worth $500,000 was buried up to its windows in what used to be solid ground. Computer trailers had been flipped upside down, their expensive machinery scattered across the beach like broken toys. But here's the strange part. Nothing else was damaged. The picnic tables were fine. The bathroom building didn't have a scratch on it. Even the flowers in the park service planters were still perfectly arranged. Whatever had destroyed the drilling, equipment had been very careful not to hurt anything that belonged to the park. Earthquake, the corporate supervisor kept saying to anyone who'd listen. Had to be an earthquake. Nothing else could do this kind of damage. But the seismic equipment hadn't recorded any earthquakes, not even small ones. I walked through the wreckage trying to look shocked like everyone else, but inside I felt that same warm satisfaction. The mountain had protected itself, and it had been smart about it. "This is impossible," one of the engineers said, staring at a drill bit that had been folded in half like a piece of paper. "The force needed to do this. It's not natural." He was wrong. It was completely natural. Just not the kind of natural that scientists understood. Yet the corporate men called for an investigation. They brought in experts from the FBI and the military, trying to prove someone had sabotaged their equipment. But the investigators couldn't find any evidence of bombs or machines or people. "It's like the ground just ate everything," one FBI agent told my boss. "I've never seen anything like it." While they argued and pointed fingers, I noticed something else happening. Other park employees were starting to change too. Sarah, who worked at the visitor center, kept complaining about headaches whenever she got near the corporate men. Tom, one of the maintenance workers, had stopped using power tools because he said they felt wrong in his hands. Even my boss seemed different. During meetings with the drilling company, he'd get confused and forget what he was supposed to say. His eyes would go blank, like he was listening to something only he could hear. The mountain was choosing more of us. Mary Birdcloud found me that evening, sitting by the lake where the destroyed equipment still lay in twisted piles. "It's starting, isn't it?" she said. "The awakening my grandmother talked about." "I think so, but I'm scared, Mary. What if I can't control it? What if I hurt someone?" She sat down beside me on the rocky shore. "The mountain doesn't want to hurt people. It wants to save them, even from themselves." "How do you know?" "Because if it wanted to hurt them, they'd all be dead already. Think about it. Yellowstone sits on top of a volcano that could destroy half the country. If the Earth really wanted to fight back, it wouldn't need you or me or anyone else." She was right. The mountain could have killed everyone at the drilling site with one small eruption. Instead, it had carefully destroyed only the machines that were hurting it. "So what happens now?" I asked. "Now you learn to use your gift. The Earth gave you this power for a reason." Over the next few days, I started practicing. Late at night, when nobody was around, I'd focus on broken things and try to understand how they worked. An old truck that wouldn't start. A computer that kept crashing. A water pipe that had been leaking for months. And slowly, I learned to fix them. Not with tools, but with my mind. I could feel their metal and plastic and electronic parts like they were part of my own body. When something was wrong, I could sense it and make it right again. The power was growing stronger every day, but so were the corporate lawyers. They sued the Park Service, claiming we were responsible for destroying their equipment. They brought in new machines and hired security guards to protect them. "We're not giving up," their supervisor announced at a press conference. "This project is too important for America's energy future." That night, I had a dream that felt more real than being awake. I stood in a courtroom, but instead of lawyers and judges, the room was filled with trees and animals and rocks that could talk. "We need your help," said a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "They don't understand that hurting us hurts them too. You have to make them see." When I woke up, I knew what I had to do. I spent the next week gathering evidence, Not the kind that came from books or computers, but the kind the mountain showed me directly. Photos of dead fish in streams where the drilling chemicals had leaked. Videos of animals fleeing from areas where the machines had been working. Documents that the corporate men thought they'd hidden, showing they knew their project would damage. The park, the mountain helped me find everything. Locked file cabinets opened when I touched them. Password-protected computers let me in without asking for codes. Even the security cameras turned away when I needed them to. It was like the whole park was working with me. Then came the day that changed everything. The drilling company brought in their biggest machine yet, a massive drill that could go deeper than anything they'd tried before. They were going to punch a hole straight through the heart of the mountain. I felt the mountain's terror like a scream inside my head. That afternoon, Yellowstone had its first real earthquake in 50 years. Not a big one, just strong enough to crack some windows and knock pictures off walls. But it came at exactly the moment the new drill touched the ground. The corporate supervisor was furious. These delays are costing us millions of dollars. We need to start drilling now, earthquake or no earthquake. But the Park Service finally grew a backbone. My boss, still looking confused and distant, announced that all drilling operations were suspended until further notice. For public safety, he said, though I could tell he wasn't sure why he was saying it. The corporate men threatened to sue again. They threatened to have my boss fired. They threatened to bring in the National Guard if necessary. But that night, something happened that made all their threats seem very small. Every single person involved in the drilling project had the same dream, the same vision of standing in a vast cave filled with glowing rocks, surrounded by tall figures with glowing eyes. The same voice speaking to them in words they could feel rather than hear. This is our home. You are welcome here as guests, but you cannot stay if you try to destroy it. Half the corporate team quit the next morning. The other half packed up their remaining equipment and left without saying goodbye. The mountain had spoken, and finally, people were listening. But I knew this was just the beginning. There were other mountains, other forests, other sacred places under attack around the world. And now I understood my real job. I wasn't just a park ranger anymore. I was Earth's lawyer, ready to fight for every tree and stream and stone that couldn't fight for itself. The transformation was almost complete. Word spread faster than wildfire. Within a month, every major news station was talking about what happened at Yellowstone. Scientists couldn't explain it. Religious leaders called it a miracle. Politicians didn't know what to say at all. But the strangest part was what happened next. People started calling from all over the world. A forest ranger in Alaska said her equipment was fixing itself. A park warden in Africa reported that poachers' trucks kept breaking down whenever they entered protected areas. A scientist in the Amazon found that illegal logging machines would stop working the moment they touched certain trees. It's happening everywhere, Mary Birdcloud told me as we sat by Old Faithful, watching families take pictures like nothing had changed. The earth is waking up all over the world. She was right. Every day brought new stories on the internet. Videos of industrial equipment mysteriously failing near sacred sites. Photos of animals gathering in unusual patterns, like they were protecting something. Reports of people experiencing strange dreams about glowing caves and ancient voices. The corporate lawyers tried to fight back, of course. They filed lawsuits in every court they could find, claiming the government owed them money for their destroyed equipment. But something funny kept happening to their cases. Important documents would disappear from locked safes. Computer files would get corrupted at exactly the wrong time. Key witnesses would forget crucial details when they tried to speak in court. It's like the earth itself is practicing law, one frustrated attorney complained to a reporter. He had no idea how right he was. I was busy learning my new job. During the day, I still wore my ranger uniform and gave tours to visitors. But at night, I worked on something much bigger. The mountain showed me things hidden deep in government files, secret reports about environmental damage that companies tried to cover up, internal emails where executives admitted they knew their projects would hurt people, financial records proving that politicians had been paid to look the other way. I copied everything onto flash drives and sent them to reporters, scientists, and environmental groups around the world. Anonymous packages that appeared on doorsteps, overnight, filled with evidence that could shut down dozens of harmful projects. "How did you get this information?" one reporter asked when she called the park office. "A reliable source," I told her. "Someone who's been watching for a very long time." The lawsuit started going the other way. Instead of companies suing the government, environmental groups began winning case after case against polluters and destroyers. Judges who had never cared about nature suddenly started ruling in favor of forests and rivers and mountains. "The courts are recognizing that ecosystems have rights too," one environmental lawyer told the news cameras. "It's a completely new way of thinking about the law." But it wasn't really new. Indigenous people like Mary's grandmother had always known that the earth was alive and deserved protection. The legal system was just finally catching up to ancient wisdom. Schools started changing too. Teachers found themselves telling students about the connections between all living things. Children began learning that rocks and trees and streams were part of one big family that included people. "My daughter came home yesterday asking if our house is sitting on someone's back," a confused parent called into a radio show. She said her teacher told them the earth has feelings. The teacher was right, even if she didn't fully understand why she'd said it. Companies that had spent decades poisoning the environment suddenly discovered they wanted to change their ways, not because the government forced them to, but because their own employees started refusing to do work that hurt the planet. "I don't know what's gotten into our people lately," one oil company executive complained at a business conference. "They act like the equipment has feelings, or something." Meanwhile, I was changing too. My body had settled into its new shape, bigger, stronger, but still human enough that most people didn't notice anything unusual. My senses were sharper than ever. I could hear conversations happening miles away, smell changes in the weather, days before they arrived, and feel the health of every living thing within a 100-mile radius. But the biggest change was in my mind. I could sense the thoughts and feelings of the mountain consciousness whenever I needed to. It was like having a wise, ancient friend always ready to give advice, and I wasn't alone anymore. Every week, I met new people who were going through the same transformation. A librarian in Montana who could make computers reveal hidden information. A farmer in Iowa whose crops grew twice as fast as his neighbors. A teacher in Florida whose students suddenly became passionate about protecting the ocean. We found each other through dreams and chance meetings and phone calls that seemed to happen by accident. Soon, we had a network of people in every state, all working together to protect the earth in their own special ways. "We're like white blood cells," Mary explained when I told her about our growing group. "The planet's immune system, getting stronger because the infection is getting worse." She was right about the infection part. For every victory we won, the destroyers fought back harder. They hired private armies to protect their equipment. They passed laws making it illegal to interfere with their projects. They even started targeting people like me directly. "David Strongbear is a terrorist," one corporate spokesman announced on TV. "He's leading some kind of environmental cult that's attacking American businesses. They tried to have me arrested. They tried to get me fired. They offered rewards for information about our network, but every time they made a move against us, something would go wrong with their plans. Police computers would crash when they tried to issue warrants. Government officials would forget why they wanted to prosecute us. Corporate executives would wake up from strange dreams and suddenly decide to retire early. The mountain was protecting its own. One night, as I sat in that same clearing where I'd first met the Sasquatch, all four of them appeared again. But this time, they weren't alone. Dozens of figures emerged from the forest, some tall and furry like traditional Sasquatch, others that looked almost human, except for their glowing eyes. All of us were Earth's children now. All of us were connected to the same ancient consciousness that had been trying to save the world long before humans existed. The biggest Sasquatch stepped forward and placed both hands on my shoulders. Images flooded my mind. Visions of cities powered by clean energy, forests growing back in places that had been destroyed, oceans filled with healthy fish again. A future where humans and nature work together instead of fighting each other. Is it really possible? I asked. The answer came not in words but in feelings, hope, determination, and something else, a sense that this was just the beginning of something much bigger. The transformation wasn't just happening to a few chosen people, it was happening to the whole world. Humanity was growing up, learning to be part of the Earth family instead of trying to rule over it. And I was honored to help show them the way. 5 years have passed since that first earthquake changed my life. I'm sitting in the same spot where I met the Sasquatch all those years ago, but everything looks different now. The hot springs bubble more peacefully. The trees grow taller and greener. Even the rocks seem to shine with an inner light that wasn't there before. Yellowstone is healthier than it's been in 100 years. And it's not the only place. Reports come in every day, from around the world. Forests that were dying are coming back to life. Rivers that were poisoned are running clean again. Animals that almost went extinct are having babies again. The change is happening faster than scientists thought possible. But then again, they're still learning that the Earth is much more alive than they ever imagined. My job at the park is different now too. I'm officially the Director of Ecological Relations, a position that didn't exist before the government finally admitted that nature needs legal representation. I spend my days helping other parks and forests connect with their own guardians, because there are hundreds of us now, maybe thousands. People who can speak with mountains and rivers and forests in their own languages. People who can help heal the damage that's been done over the years. My family back on the reservation is doing better than ever, not because I'm sending them money, though my new job pays well, but because the land itself is helping them. Their gardens grow amazing vegetables now. The old wells are flowing with clean water again. Even the buffalo are coming back. It's like the Earth is saying sorry for all the hard times, my cousin Jake told me during his last visit. Like it's trying to make up for everything we lost. He's not wrong. The mountain consciousness feels guilty about how long it stayed silent while people suffered. Now it's working overtime to set things right. Mary Birdcloud comes to visit every month. She's 93 now, but she looks younger than she did 5 years ago. The Earth takes care of its friends. Your grandmother would be so proud. She told me yesterday, as we watched Old Faithful erupt exactly on schedule, she always said you were meant for something special. This wasn't exactly what I pictured when I was a kid, I said. The best callings never are. She's right about that. I never dreamed I'd become a bridge between two worlds, the human world and the Earth world. I never imagined I'd help write the laws that gave legal rights to ecosystems. I never thought I'd teach college students how to listen to what the land is trying to tell them. But here I am, and I can't imagine doing anything else. The corporate world adapted faster than anyone expected. Once they realized the Earth could defend itself, most companies decided it was better to work with nature than against it. The smart ones hired people like me to help them understand what the land needed. We want to build a solar farm, but we need to know if the desert is okay with it. One CEO asked me during a video call last week. I connected him with Sarah, who had become the Southwest's main desert guardian. She spent a day walking the proposed site, listening to what the rocks and sand and cactuses had to say. The desert likes the idea, she reported back, but it wants the panels arranged in spirals instead of straight lines. Something about helping the energy flow better. The company changed their design. Their solar farm is now producing 30% more power than their computer models predicted it would. That's what happens when humans and nature work together. My body finished changing about 2 years ago. I'm taller now, about 7 feet, and much stronger than I used to be. My hair grew longer and darker, and my eyes have that same glow the other Guardians have. But I can still pass for human when I need to, especially in dim light. The transformation wasn't scary once I stopped fighting it. It was like growing up all over again, becoming who I was always meant to be. Children aren't afraid of us at all. They seem to understand instinctively that we're here to protect them and the world they'll inherit. Adults take longer to adjust, but they're learning. Last month, a little girl got lost during a family camping trip. The search and rescue teams looked for hours but couldn't find her, so they called me. I walked into the forest and asked the trees where she was. They showed me a mental picture of a cave near the river, where she was staying dry and safe while a family of bears kept watch over her. We found her exactly where the trees said she'd be, playing with bear cubs while their mother made sure she didn't wander off again. The big mama bear told me to wait here until my daddy came, the little girl explained to her parents. She said the tree man would show him the way. Stories like that are becoming normal now. The boundary between the human world and the natural world is dissolving, and we're all learning to be part of the same family. But the work isn't finished. There are still places where the earth is hurting, still people who don't understand that we're all connected, still corporations and governments that think they can take whatever they want without asking permission. That's why Guardians like me exist, to speak for those who can't speak for themselves, to protect what needs protecting, to teach what needs teaching. I had a dream last night that felt like a glimpse of the future. I saw cities built inside living trees, their branches strong enough to hold thousands of people. I saw farms where the plants decided what they wanted to grow, producing food that was more nutritious than anything we have now. I saw oceans so clean they glowed blue-green with healthy life. And I saw children, human children, playing with young animals and talking to flowers like they were old friends. That's the world we're building. A world where the old hurt between humans and nature is finally healed. I don't know how long I'll live. The mountain consciousness has slowed down my aging, but I'm still mortal. What I do know is that when my time comes, there will be others ready to take my place. My nephew Tommy is showing signs of the gift. So is my friend Sarah's daughter. The earth is already choosing the next generation of Guardians. As I sit here watching the sun set over Yellowstone, I feel the mountain's contentment like a warm blanket around my shoulders. We did it. We saved this place, and in saving it we learned how to save the whole world. The mountain remembers everything, every tree that grew here, every animal that lived here, every person who loved this land. And now it has new memories to treasure. Memories of the day humans finally learned to listen, memories of the moment everything changed, and memories of all the Guardians who helped make it possible. My name is David Strongbear, and I am the mountain's voice in the human world. I am exactly where I belong.